Good evening.
Recording in progress.
It is the Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025 meeting of the City Council. Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Fahey.
Here.
Mayor Lay.
Here.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Here.
Councilmember Hefner.
Here.
Councilmember Hamlington. Here. Councilmember Kern.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson.
Okay. Would you join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right. The next item on the agenda is public comments on items not on the agenda and items on the consent agenda. If you could please tell us your name and whether you live in Louisville when you come up to speak, that would be great. If you want to provide public comment on any item that is not on the agenda or that is on the consent agenda, please fill out a card and bring it up to the city clerk, and she will call your name. This is a time when you can take up to 3 minutes to tell us what's on your mind, and if you have less than 3 minutes of information to share, that's quite all right. If you are interested in pooling your time with someone else, you can have up to 6 minutes to speak. Again, you don't have to speak all that long. The only thing that we would ask is that you refrain from cheering or booing or that kind of thing, because it's challenging for people, some folks, to stand up and speak to a crowd on a dais. And we want to make sure that we get all the information that people have to say and to get the widest possible group we can. So I'd appreciate your cooperation on that. Do we have anybody who signed up? Mm-hmm. Okay. Please come, and again, state your name and whether you're from Louisville or not.
Laurel Cole.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Kim.
My name is Laurel Cole. I am a Louisville resident. I am here as the chair of the Library Board of Trustees, and I'm just here to share with you our excitement over the summer reading program that has kicked off the day after school got out, so about 11 days ago. If you walk into the library, you'll feel the excitement. It's palpable. There are volunteers at a table where they're helping families sign up for summer reading, and then there's all sorts of prizes that babies, kids, teenagers, and adults can earn for reading this summer. So if you haven't done so already, I would highly recommend that you sign up, sign your families up. I signed my husband up, and my kids have already read, the first 10 days, so they're very excited. I also wanted to invite you to the Summer Carnival, which is next Wednesday from 10 to 12, right out front of the library. There are carnival games, face painting, cotton candy, bounce houses. It is a wonderful community event if you have never attended. Last year, there were almost 700 families, or not families, but total people who were there, from our littlest community members to some of our eldest. So please come out if you can, get some cotton candy, get your face painted, and we would love to see you there. I should also mention that we had 3,100 participants in summer reading last year. So please join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dallas Miniker.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. My name is Dallas, and I live in Broomfield, just across the street from the Red Tail Ridge development site. I'm here to follow up on an email I recently sent to the planning team and the Ward 3 council members regarding the absence of residential housing in the current development plans for Red Tail Ridge. While I understand and appreciate the economic and healthcare benefits that the project will bring, I do believe this is a significant missed opportunity, especially given the ongoing and well-documented housing shortage in Colorado, in particular the northwest suburbs of Denver. I've learned that the current lack of housing is tied to zoning restrictions in this development and that a zoning amendment would be required. I also understand that the developers would then need to consider any risks of residential integration and may also be considering any other different zoning amendments that they go through the council for. With this in mind, I do want to urge the council to take a leadership role in advancing the conversation around mixed-use development. You know, the decision to separate where people work from where they can afford to live does drive longer commutes, worsens traffic, increases environmental strain, and it limits the sense of community that everybody has here in Louisville. It also makes these office-based developments less attractive, especially in an era where remote and hybrid work policies are not only expected, but becoming more common, especially amongst people in my age group and younger professionals. So as someone who may not live in Louisville or the city-county limits, I do live in direct proximity to this development, and I do ask that you seriously consider initiating a process to explore residential integration in Red Tail Ridge, even if it does require a land use amendment, or zoning amendments or voter approval. I do think it's a conversation worth having for the long-term sustainability and livability of this region. So I want to thank you for your time and your commitment to a thoughtful, balanced development plan.
Thank you. No others? Okay, seeing no others. Next, move to the consent agenda. Just to inform those of you who don't know how the consent agenda works, they're usually matters that are relatively straightforward and don't need necessarily a council discussion or particular action on each one, and so we approve them as a group. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good. Next item is council informational comments and committee reports. If you have had a committee meeting or a meeting of another kind that the rest of us may not have gone to, please speak up. Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I just wanted to mention quickly that I was at the Rocky Mountain Municipal Airport's open house, and while we can't really discuss legally what's happening there, I did want to let you all know that the airport staff itself is trying to partner with the pilots and with the flight schools. And they are encouraging several things. Their checklist for the pilots are avoid disturbing or overflying residential areas if practical, climb initially, reduce RPM and power as able, fly standard or higher glide path, overfly major road corridors and/or open space when able, and use the 30R or 12L for night pattern operations. So they are partnering with the pilots and trying to encourage the pilots and the schools to make it a little bit more noise level lowering for all of us. So thank you.
Good. Yes, Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. Good evening.
So two things. One, the Economic Vitality team, as well as the committee, was part of a business beat that's done monthly in Louisville with business owners. This month we invited restaurant owners. We had a really nice turnout and a fantastic conversation. Wanted to thank my fellow council members for being there, but also the business owners who were present. These open conversations and dialogues are really interesting and incredibly helpful, and hopefully they also see the benefit. I also would like to make just a statement, if I may. I understand that as a council, we're not. I personally, Judy Kern, am appalled at what happened in Sunday in Boulder. A terrorist attack, regardless of how large or small, in my personal opinion, is unacceptable. And that kind of hate has no place in our community. And I know many people here who feel the same way, people I represent, and I want you to know that I stand with you, and I pray for everybody who was injured. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Others? No? Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So today we had a meeting for the Street Fair Committee. As many members of the community know, it kicks off in June, a series of concerts. And this year is the 25th anniversary. There will be some special swag available for purchase. And I'd like to thank Iris as well for her being such a great staff liaison on that committee. Her expertise is very much appreciated, and I encourage everyone to attend the event and then also sign up as well to volunteer. There's still some slots available for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We had, I don't want to summarize too long on this, but we had recently an economic vitality committee meeting. We touched on the issue of tariffs, which are sort of on again, off again, still on again at the moment, and expressed some concern, as I think many do, to our businesses that are facing some hardships as a result of imposition of tariffs, particularly those who have a lot of foreign produced goods. So it remains to be seen what goes on there, but our concerns are with them. I think the members of the committee and perhaps council members may try to visit some businesses in the Colorado Tech Center at some point. I know that our manager of economic vitality does this all the time. She's terrific, and it may help to know that the council or council members kind of support those efforts. And so that may be something that you get asked to do, council members, and just know that's happening. The other thing is we are going to be doing more with respect to gearing up for a couple, I'm not going to say the word, essentially the 250th. I can ask the city manager because she knows that word. But maybe, Iris, do you know the word? I think you got it just about as well as anybody can get it. I just think it's just 250th. But at any rate, there's that. There certainly is Sundance that's coming. The film festival will be coming in a couple of years. Very excited about that. There's a lot of preparations. There are a lot of both preparations within a variety of organizations in Louisville. We're going to be involved in that, and we will be working with other communities, and already are, actually. Our staff is meeting with people and has been for ages. So very excited about that. The other thing I wanted to do is certainly echo, maybe in my own words, the concerns that Councilmember Kern raised. I was horrified and angered and saddened by the senseless violence that was inflicted on our Jewish sisters in our neighboring community in Boulder on Sunday. Along with others in the wider community, I condemn the perpetrators' attack on peaceful demonstrators. I pray for the healing of the victims and for their family and friends. And you take the opportunity to just condemn that sort of hate in a democratic society. It just is inconsistent with the way we work here. Democracy is very, very precious to all of us. People who are demonstrating, doing so peacefully, it's exactly what our framers had in mind. It's exactly what our Constitution protects, and to have that sort of violence inflicted, much less violence inflicted because of the identity of the people who are demonstrating, is just revolting and intolerable. I want to take the opportunity also to thank the first responders who took the suspect into custody. As that investigation and the legal proceedings move forward, may justice be done. Any other comments? Okay. City Manager's report.
Thank you. So this last Sunday, we launched the Louisville Look Ahead. It's a weekly look ahead of meetings, events, and other happenings in Louisville, and delivered every Sunday morning. People can go to the city's website to subscribe. And I want to thank Grace and Derek of the communications team. This is their efforts through Sam's management as well to bring that forward. Also, something that the Open Space Division is very excited about is the BioBlitz survey, and it's going to be as great as it sounds. They are partnering with the Colorado Natural Heritage Program at Colorado State University for a week-long biodiversity BioBlitz survey, June 9th through 13th. This large-scale scientific survey will span more than 800 acres of natural land and engage both professional scientists and volunteers. The findings will fill data gaps in Colorado's biodiversity records, identify rare or imperiled species, support open space policy and restoration planning, and provide Louisville's first official biodiversity baseline. So congratulations to the Open Space Division for coordinating this effort. And then also we are going to have a sales tax workshop on June 18th from 1:30 to 2:30 at the library. And this is to help local businesses navigate the city's licensing and sales use tax processes. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, our first item of business today is ordinance number 1896, series 2025, an ordinance amending Louisville Municipal Code section 17.72.190 regarding yard and bulk requirements for general development plans, first reading, and to set the public hearing. We have recently made changes to how we do first readings. It used to be that we basically read the title and set the public hearing, and that was it. What we're doing, because the ordinances allow us to do this, because we think it will be more efficient and effective and helpful for the public to know some of this in advance of the public hearing, is to have staff provide a presentation, and then for council to be able to ask questions and get, and if need be, or if they desire to make amendments and so forth, even at first reading. There is not a public hearing tonight, but that'll be coming up, and hearing some of us discuss this and the presentation, we hope, will make for better public policy going forward. So with that, Director?
All right. Yeah. Good evening, Mayor Lay, members of City Council, Rob Zuccaro, Community Development Director. I'll be presenting on this item. The mayor went over this, but I was going to do a little introduction as well, since this is a new process for us. We're hoping that this will help council gain an understanding of the proposal in a little bit more detail. You can ask clarifying questions, request analysis and information for second reading. And then also, under the charter for ordinance adoption, council has the opportunity to vote to amend, adopt, or reject the ordinance, or take any such actions. So as we saw at the last time we did this, there was some direction on some amendments and so forth. So we'll continue to navigate this as best we can and make this a helpful process, hopefully. So this is a proposal by Porter Care Adventist Health Systems. They initiated this ordinance amendment. It's a text amendment. And they own 2 properties, zoned planned community zone district, but as a text amendment, it's broadly applicable to all properties in the city that have the same zoning. And within the planned community zone district, the section that we're looking at, the idea is to allow properties to establish custom yard and bulk standards. So within our code, yard and bulk is I was going to say a fancy way, but it's not that fancy. It's a way of saying height setbacks and lot coverage, which is probably how you all would understand it. There's probably a few more things in there, but generally it's height setbacks and lot coverage. So on a general development plan, these are custom zoning documents. And the intent of a GDP, I'll talk a little bit more about, is to create the custom zoning. So there's some limitations within the current code. The current regulations restrict GDP yard and bulk standards to be in general conformance with comparable zone districts. So we don't always know what general conformance means, but I can tell you how we've interpreted that recently as well. So here's the text of what's being proposed. There's some again, just some text amendments in the ordinance, so this would change the process for processing general development plans, as well as amendments to general development plans. And it basically says that those yard and bulk standards can be established on those general development plans, as long as they're consistent with the comprehensive plan or other adopted plan of the city and consistent with the desired character of the district. There's some additional language there that we've kept because I think some of our old GDPs don't specify yard and bulk standards, so that's kind of a catch-all, that if there's old ones that don't have them written out, we can still refer to the zone districts. A little bit of background, the original code for the planned community zone district was adopted in 1983. There's really been no substantive changes, at least to this section of the code since that time. Again, general conformance is the key word here. It's, if you look back at our GDPs that have been adopted over time, there's not a lot of consistency in how that general conformance has been interpreted. I would say, though, starting in 2010, there has been a lot of consistency saying that basically you have to match or be very similar to those underlying zone districts. So if you want to go outside of those standards, you really have to wait until you do the PUD, and then you have to ask for waivers through the PUD process from those underlying standards. So the idea is that we'd create a process that provides more flexibility. So if you look at the purpose statements in the ordinance itself for planned community zone district, it says the purpose of that zone district and the purpose of creating general development plans is to use contemporary land planning principles and coordinated community design, and that you are supposed to establish the type and character of development within the GDP. What I believe that means is we're creating a custom zoning. So these are properties that have to be more than 30 acres. They have to be under single ownership. The idea is they're master plan developments. They could be a mix of uses, but that we're creating custom zoning that's contemporary land planning principles rather than just relying under the underlying zoning. Yard and bulk standards are required to be on the GDPs per the ordinance, so you can't ignore them either. So we're really it's saying you just have to restate whatever the underlying zoning is under the current ordinance. So I think that general conformance standard could be seen as in conflict with the purpose and intent of that zone district and general development plans. So the proposal would allow the city to adopt more comprehensive development standards within general development plans and amendments to them. So, and I want to note that if somebody comes and says, we want to do something very different from the underlying yard and bulk standards, you're not obligated to approve that. It's still at your discretion as city council with planning commission recommendation. It's the applicant's obligation to provide clarity on what they want to do and make the city council and the community comfortable with their proposal before that gets adopted. You would still have final design review at the PUD process. So the idea, again, this provides a more predictable process for property owners to plan developments and could provide the city council, more opportunity to define the character at the time of master planning under the general development plan. I did want to bring up the city council work plan. Again, this wasn't initiated by city staff. It was initiated by a property owner. But we do think it's consistent with this work plan item for city council, which is near-term targeted priority development code updates to improve the city's development review process. So I think this is an opportunity to provide a more business-friendly approach to development review and is consistent with this because it makes a more predictable process for the property owner as they're planning their development. Otherwise, they have to rely on the PUD process, which is a much bigger investment, and if it isn't approved, that can be a problem for what they intended to develop under the GDP. So having that certainty at the time of GDP can be very helpful for the property owner. Planning Commission did review this ordinance on May 8th last month, and they are recommending approval as drafted. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director. Council questions? Yes, Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you. Yes, I have one question. That's when you're talking about kind of complementing the other uses around it or complementary uses within the city. Well, for example, we have one hospital. What is their basis based on? I mean, is it, we don't have another hospital to base what a hospital facility should look like.
Right. So if somebody comes for a GDP amendment, let me see if I'm answering your question correctly, okay. Right? So as this is a little bit of a theoretical example, but if somebody comes with a GDP amendment and they're saying, hey, we want more height or different yard or bulk standards than the underlying zoning, what I would anticipate is they would bring analysis of different heights of hospitals, different stories. You can do bulk diagrams. You could put provisions on a general development plan that require step backs or limitations on bulk or higher elements of buildings within certain zones within the property where there's view corridors that may be critical, or just to transition down into lower density areas. So all of these things could be written into those regulations within the general development plan. And then part of the public record for that GDP analysis could be reviewing, what other hospitals require for building height and what does that look like. There's lots of examples around the Front Range that you can look at and see. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Yes, Councilmember Cooperman.
Great. First, I was wondering, so besides, I guess, Redtail and Vista, where else do we have the planned community zone district zoning in the city?
Yeah, so the northern part of the Colorado Tech Center, the majority of the McCaslin Corridor, Centennial Valley, North End and Steel Ranch are all planned community zone district developments. There is some of Coal Creek Ranch, I think, that's planned community zone district. Did I catch them all? Yeah, I think that's the majority of them. I think we hit most of them there.
That's helpful. And then I guess I'm still trying to understand exactly what this is going to do. So maybe I'll try to take an example and see if that helps to clarify. So, on the application for that, for this change to our ordinances, maybe it's just because of how they have to fill things out, but there was a property listed on that application, and it's a certain lot at Redtail Ridge. Presumably, it's the lot where the hospital wants to locate. So in any case, right now we have a GDP that governs all of Redtail Ridge, right? And so what is the nature of the yard and bulk requirements in that GDP?
Right. So the ConocoPhillips campus GDP, which covers Redtail Ridge, includes specific setback standards. They're listed on the GDP itself And then there's a note on the GDP that talks about height that says that any changes in height above what the CDDSG, the commercial development standards, would have to be waived through a PUD process. So there are no special height standards. Now, if you look at the Avista campus general development plan, which was adopted before 2010, they have heights allowed up to 4 stories and I think around 75 feet. Again, we don't think that's consistent with what could be approved now based on the code language. So we have variation throughout the city on these GDPs.
Right. Okay. So if we stick to the ConocoPhillips one, under our current process, if someone came in and wanted to, they would, as you said, they would have to ask for a waiver at the PUD stage.
Correct.
Okay. So let's say we adopt this change to our ordinances. How would things proceed if someone wanted to now build out something at Red Tail Ridge? Would they come to us for a GDP amendment maybe? Would they, or what do you think would be the process?
Yeah, I think there's 2 main options. One is that somebody comes with a GDP amendment on its own, and the GDP amendment would outline the intended yard and bulk standards for that future development, and then as a separate subsequent process, there would be a PUD application to review, and you'd make sure it was consistent with what was adopted in that GDP. You could do a concurrent application is the other thing, is you could do a GDP amendment or just bring a PUD with the waivers and bring the PUD with the
Right.
GDP amendment. So that's another option that could happen.
Okay. That's helpful. I thought I had another question. Okay, so now if we look more broadly across the city, I don't know, is there anywhere like where we would get, like a new GDP for a planned community zone district that would, saying we adopted this soon, someone would come in with asking for a new GDP in a planned community zone district?
I am not aware of any 30-plus acre properties. Somebody could consolidate and purchase properties. I would say there's 30-plus acres undeveloped within Centennial Valley
Yeah.
that are probably contiguous. I'd have to confirm it, but I think there could be. So you could pull out a new GDP in Centennial Valley as an example, but I think it's unlikely just based on the fact that we're built out as a community and we don't have new 30-acre properties that aren't already within this zone district.
Okay. And maybe one more question to go back a little bit. So again, like on the application, there was reference to a single lot, I think, in the Red Tail Ridge. So so that I understand, like, so if, can a GDP amendment only, could it just apply to a portion of a planned community zone district?
Yes, yeah. And I would say that the lot identification in the application form really isn't
Yes.
related to this application. But yes, we do process GDP amendments for individual lots within established GDPs.
Right. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Kern.
Thank you for this and bringing it up. I appreciate Planning Commission taking a look and giving us their advice. I was actually just curious of your opinion in processing so many of these developments for Louisville as to how you see this being beneficial to the process, not just for developers, but also for facilitating and staff processing these.
Right, yeah, I think this is very consistent with what staff and council have been talking about for a while as far as how can we find ways to improve our development review process by creating more consistency for the developer, but that also helps staff, right? So if through the GDP process, we know what the intended yard and bulk is and we don't have to wait for a PUD waiver, that not only helps a property owner or developer, but it helps staff because we spend a lot of time working with the property owners and developers as they're coming in. We can give them more clear direction. We spend less time kind of iterating with what might or might not work. So I think it's helpful for both staff and property owners.
That's great. So one of the results of this could be a more expeditious process, helping to potentially save money for the city as well as developers.
Yes, I think so.
Thank you very
Yeah, I
much.
think there could be staff efficiencies that come out of these types of amendments as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks. Yeah, I think my confusion, and so I really appreciate this part of the process, is it kind of seems like, gosh, this would be great if we had it, but our current GDPs clear enough? It seems pretty onerous to have to come back for a GDP amendment to talk about like the height of a building, let's say. GDP amendments are subject to referendum and all that kind of stuff. So it feels like that's actually harder. Now, if through the GDP process we had clearly established what we were looking for, then it seems like a simpler process. Like, oh, great, we can go to the GDP, we see what it says. We don't have to do a PUD or ask for any sort of special permission because it's already pretty clear in the GDP. So I guess my question, Director Zuccaro, is like, does staff feel like our current GDPs have been written in a way that this will be useful, or are we going to have to be doing GDP amendments or clarifications within GDPs? Because you sound like you thought there wouldn't be a lot of just new GDPs that come up. It would be mostly amending current ones. So I'm just trying to understand, like, it to me it sounds like it's more work, but then you're telling us it's less. And so I believe you just maybe need some better explanation of why it's less or how that's going to be easier.
Right. So I think there's a lot of different scenarios that could play out. I think that just on how much work and how much process, I think this could be beneficial to property owners because they want to get assurance of what their development parameters are. Some property owners will want to do that ahead of time, and they'll want to process the GDP ahead of a PUD. That's really at their discretion. This ordinance doesn't force them to do that. They can work under the current GDPs and then just come in for PUD waivers like the current process. It doesn't inhibit them from doing that. But if they think it would be helpful to do this stepwise so that they get the assurity before they invest in the PUD development, because it's a lot of architecture and engineering to design that building without assurance. So what I hear you saying is that it might slow down the process in that there might be more steps, but the steps they can take will create a lot more clarity and confidence for them later down the road. Yes.
Okay, that's really helpful. I think that clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Yep. Councilmember Cooperman.
I have, I guess, one more question, which is a question about process, mostly just to educate myself. So, as I understand, there's a section in our code which says that someone can come in and they can ask for a change to our ordinances. And I'm just wondering, just curious about how this sort of proceeds. Like, do we just take verbatim what they've asked for, or do we work with them, or, how does that process kind of go?
Yeah, I think that in this process where it's initiated through our zoning ordinance, I think there could be opportunity to work with them. I think you have the option to, approve or deny, or I think there is opportunity to ask the applicant if they're willing to accept a modification. Mm-hmm. If not, you could deny it if you weren't satisfied with the language.
Okay, that's helpful. And I just wanted to make one comment. So in that part of the code, I don't remember the number in Title 17, it says that City Council, the Planning Commission, or a property owner can initiate this kind of change to our ordinances. And I just want to comment, I feel like that's a little bit, it could be more equitable in the sense that someone who's a renter, either residential or commercial, is not able to do this. So, a business owner who might want to see some change to our ordinances but rents their space, right, they can't come to us as the code is currently written and ask for a change to our ordinances. Anyway, thanks.
Okay. I'm just thinking whether I want to ask this question or not. It is possible, is it not, for staff to initiate changes like this? I think that often is the case, isn't it? I mean, isn't that, we get requests for changes and you,
Yeah,
based on
we'll
practice.
identify and initiate ordinance amendments from time to time. Ideally, we put it on the council work plan ahead of time, but sometimes we find things in between that we want to propose.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem to me, and it may be just, this may be an issue that is better for the public hearing, but I am presuming that, or am I to presume that staff supports this particular change?
Yes, I think, yeah. And we met with the applicant, talking about their development plans for the future. This was identified as a potential amendment in consultation with staff. And, we advised them that they could initiate that through an application if they liked, and we are in support of it.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. With that, do we have a motion?
I'll move that ordinance number 1896, Series 2025 pass on first reading and the public hearing be set for
July 8th.
July 8th
At what time?
Second.
6 p.m.?
at 6 p.m.
And just to clarify, 2025.
2025,
Thank you.
yes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Actually, nope. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, good. July 8th it is. All right. Next is resolution number 37, series 2025. Resolution approving planned unit development amendment to replace existing freestanding signs and add a new wall campus sign on the Avista Adventist Hospital campus. And I will open the public hearing. And is there a staff presentation here?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. This is Emily Klein Gibson, Planner 2, with the staff presentation. This is a request to approve an amended campus-wide sign package for the Advent Health Avista Hospital property located at 100 Health Park Drive. This will include replacing existing freestanding signs and adding a new wall sign. To provide a brief overview, this is a PUD amendment application for lots 2 through 4 of the Advent Health Avista Hospital property, which is located in the southern part of Louisville, west of 88th Street, as outlined in blue on the screen. The amendment includes replacing 9 existing freestanding signs, removing 1 freestanding sign, relocating 1 freestanding sign, and adding 1 new wall sign. 4 existing wall signs are proposed to remain unchanged. This property has previously undergone sign changes since the establishment of a campus-wide master sign plan in 1990. It consisted of 13 freestanding and wall signs originally, and there have been some changes to that master sign plan over time, including an administrative PUD amendment in 1997 and some permit changes to the signage in 2002. To provide a brief background on our sign regulations, our original regulations were established in 1981 and also underwent some minor changes throughout the 90s, and then a major change in 2006. And then in 2019, all previous sign regulations were repealed and a sign code for the city was established. And just to note, all new proposals for signage must comply with the sign code regardless of when the original signs may have been placed or any previous changes to the signage. So again, the details include replacing 9 freestanding directional signs, relocating 1 existing freestanding sign from city property to within the hospital property boundaries, removing 1 freestanding directional sign and adding 1 new wall sign. The image on the bottom right provides an example of what one of the freestanding signs will look like both in daylight and at nighttime, as well as the wall sign located above. 5 waivers are requested for this application, 4 of which are related to the freestanding signs, and 1 waiver is for the wall sign. Just to provide a visual of where each sign will be located, starting to the far west, the green box represents the sign that's currently on city property facing Highway US 36 that will be relocated within the property boundaries. The small blue box to the north shows the location of the new wall sign. The purple box in the center shows the existing freestanding sign that will be removed and not replaced. And all orange boxes show existing freestanding signs that will be replaced in the same location and of similar size. Also shown is are 4 boxes in gray towards the center. Those are the existing wall signs that are not proposed to change. So the new signage is proposed to improve wayfinding around the hospital campus and reflect the current Advent Health Avista hospital branding. The new freestanding signs are proposed to be in the same location and of similar size as shown in the table. And the sign that will be relocated onto hospital property will include a landscaped base. The proposed wall sign will be 4 feet 3/8 inch tall and approximately 131.7 square feet in size. So included with this request are 5 waivers as shown on the screen. They include allowing the quantity of freestanding signs to exceed the maximum permitted, which is 4. Also waiving requirements of architectural base and borders, as well as landscaping requirements for the base of freestanding signs. Allowing the illumination of background for a freestanding sign, whereas typically only the letters are allowed to be illuminated. And then finally, allowing the area of the wall sign to exceed the maximum area permitted. Staff analyzed each sign against the criteria in our sign code and found that aside from the 5 waiver requests, all signs meet the criteria. Signage oriented towards US 36 are allowed increases in maximum height and square footages, which was applied to the sign shown on the bottom right. With that consideration, the sign also meets our sign code criteria for size. Staff analyzed the waiver requests against our sign waiver criteria and found them to be consistent with the character, scale, and placement of previously approved signage on the campus, with the understanding that the proposed freestanding signs are primarily provided for clear wayfinding around the campus, the hospital grounds. And staff also finds the proposed waiver request for the size of the wall sign supports the intent of the sign to be visible from Highway 36 at a distance. And the sign would be scaled appropriately on the building facade. So Planning Commission reviewed this application at the May 8th meeting and recommended approval. Staff also recommends approval of Resolution 37, Series 2025, recommending approval of a request for a plan unit development amendment to replace the freestanding signs and add a new wall sign on the hospital campus. And this concludes the staff presentation. The applicant is present but does not have a presentation tonight. Thank you.
That was my next question. Great. We take public comment at this point. No public comment. Okay. Then we will come back to council for further council questions or discussion. Does anybody have, looking online? Yes, Councilmember Kern.
Thanks. No questions. Just actually a thank you for clarifying, because that was the only question I had before you spoke, Emily, so I appreciate it, was to make sure that the sign for 36 was still going to be really visible to all the cars since we were changing the location. It is paramount that people who need a hospital quickly can see that that's where it is. So I appreciate that. Otherwise, I actually think this is terrific, and the renderings really look like it will make it easier to get around and find things. So I love it. Thanks.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, Councilmember Cooperman.
Yeah, so one of the waivers is about the number of freestanding signs. And I'm wondering, what is the basis for our limit in the sign code?
So typically, just based on my remembering the sign code, there's one or two freestanding signs typically allowed for the property. This property, since it's so large, would allow a maximum of 4.
I would just add that there's usually a limitation in sign codes just to avoid sign clutters. So that can actually be dangerous and not helpful if you have too many signs and they're not appropriately designed. So it allows the city to make sure that's done appropriately.
Okay, good. And then, could you go to the slide where you have the rendering of the signs? Okay, so I just wanted to be clear. So the dark image, is that, so there's a left and a right. Is that what it's supposed to look like at nighttime, or is only one side of that supposed to be what it looks like at nighttime?
So just the dark image, both views. So the front where it's red and the emergency, that's the front, and then the back would not be illuminated. There's
Okay,
no
so it's just the
lettering.
back of the sign.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes.
So in other words, so at nighttime, there would be a white band across the top that's illuminated, and then the red band illuminated, and so on.
Yes, yes, and that is one of the waiver requests, is to allow the background illumination for the signage.
Okay. And so let me just try to clarify that too. So from reading the staff report, it sounded like the waiver was related to the red background illumination. Is that correct?
I may have written in the staff report, it was for the red illumination specifically, but the general waiver request on the PUD document is for background illumination.
Whatsoever?
Yes,
Okay.
generally.
Okay. And then one other little question. So again, from the staff report, it wasn't quite clear. So the new wall sign, do we know, will that, if I'm driving by on the highway, will it actually be readable, do we know, or not? It wasn't clear to me.
So one of the waiver requests is to allow for a larger sign. There is a bit of a berm right when you're at the hospital campus
Yeah.
on the highway. So the intent is when you're from a distance, you can see the sign on the highway
Okay.
heading towards the property.
But it'll be actually large enough from that distance to be readable.
That's the intent, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other council members with questions? First, doesn't look like it. Any comments on the proposal here, or can we have a motion?
Yes, I have a motion. I move that we approve Resolution Number 37, Series 2025, a resolution approving a planned unit development amendment to replace existing freestanding signs and add a new wall sign on the Avista Advent Hospital campus.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, the only point that I would make is it looks like this is going to be a great way to make it easier to find your way around and eliminate some of the clutter out there. And also the sign from the highway, I think, is really good, particularly in the time between when today and the time when the hospital is built on, the other campus is built on Red Tail Ridge. So I'm all for it. And I find that the waivers are supported by the rationale that's given in the staff report. All right, can we get, let's say, we just need a, I think we just need we need a roll call, yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey,
Yes.
Mayor Lay,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooperman,
Yes.
Councilmember Hefner,
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kern.
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
just before you move on, I'm not feeling great, so I didn't come in, and I'm actually gonna sign off at this point, so I'm just not feeling well, so just wanted you guys to know that I'm walking out of the room.
I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks. Right. So the next item is resolution number 38, series 2025, a resolution approving a planned unit development agreement to allow construction of a 7,100 square foot industrial building and a 7,000 square foot industrial building at 380 South Taylor Avenue. Open the public hearing and ask for presentation from staff.
Great. Good evening, Mayor, Councilors, Matt Post, Senior Planner on the Community Development Team. The item before you tonight is Resolution 38, approval of a planned unit development amendment to allow the construction of 2 industrial buildings and associated site improvements at 380 South Taylor Avenue or 380 Taylor Avenue. There's a couple things we need to work out on the address on this one, but as far as background of this site, the property is depicted on this screen. It is vacant and located in the Colorado Technology Center at the northeast corner of Taylor Avenue and Cherry Street. It's highlighted in the graphic on your screen. The property is 1.2 acres in size. This property was part of an existing, or rather is part of an existing PUD that was actually originally proposed as a phased approach with the building to the north. That southern phase was never built out, and that was approved in 2001, and so the property has remained vacant since that time. The proposal includes 2 buildings, one 7,000 square feet, one 7,150 square feet. Again, you can see the site plan depicted on the screen. There is a central access point on the west side of the site, centralized on Taylor Avenue. Water quality and detention areas are provided on the east side of the site, between the Hammerhead turnaround that's required by the fire district that you can see depicted here and that east side property boundary. 2 plaza spaces are provided directly adjacent to those 2 buildings that are with roll-up doors facing internal to one another, parking spaces internal as well. The rest of the site is fully landscaped. 26 vehicle parking spaces are proposed with this particular proposal, including 4 bicycle parking spaces, and the site is in compliance with our electric vehicle charging infrastructure ordinance. The buildings proposed to be constructed are using architectural metal panels that would feature varying building height, plane, and profile. Both buildings incorporate variations in roof form and pitch with enhanced building entries, and then articulated facades and added transparency along Cherry Street, which will be the primary frontage. That'll be on the south side, and that elevation is on the on the top of this particular slide. Both buildings include additional transparency adjacent to Taylor Avenue as well. That would be the west side frontage. And the south building, which would be the most visible, varies in height from almost 16 feet to just over 25 feet, while the north building is just over 23 feet tall. As part of this application, the applicant is requesting a waiver from the Industrial Design Guideline standards that prohibit the use of metal as a primary facade material. The applicant is also requesting a waiver from design guidelines, which require a varying building setback for multi-building proposals. We'll discuss that in the later slides and get into the detail on that siting and siting as we move forward here. The applicant provided some renderings of their proposals of what this building or the building proposal would look like. So the top would be a southeast or a southwest view, The middle elevation would be a west elevation visible from Taylor Street, and then there's another west or southwest elevation on the bottom. Regarding landscaping on the site, moving through the proposal, 35.2% of this site is landscaped. Well, I'm sure as you're aware, 25% of the site is required to be landscaped. A waiver has been requested regarding street tree planting, as the site is heavily encumbered by easements and underground utility lines that are actually visible on this particular slide. If you look to the bottom of this site plan, you'll see a number of lines running parallel that are horizontal parallel, horizontal on the site and parallel to one another. Those are indicative of existing underground utility easements, and then also a ditch easement that precludes any plantings in that area. So the applicant is still proposing a total of 37 trees on site. They're meeting the screening requirements that are required in the industrial zone district for properties that are adjacent to one another of the same zoning. And they're also preserving the 2 cottonwoods, actually, that have popped up on the southeast corner of the property. Those are depicted here as well. 151 low water shrubs are proposed with a low water grass seed mix that is intended for that easement and utility area, again, where woody plantings are precluded because of the easements that are in place. So formal analysis of conformance with the PUD is provided in your staff report, but the entire proposal is generally in conformance with the industrial design guidelines outside of the 4 waivers that are requested by the applicant. The first waiver request is for relief from the standard that mandates varying setbacks from multi-building proposals on a single lot. This would specifically apply to the west side of the site along Taylor Avenue. The applicant has proposed that both buildings be set back the minimum setback requirement, which is 30 feet. You can see that called out in green for both buildings on this site. The applicant is making this waiver request based on the corner lot configuration of the property and the 2 30-foot setbacks that apply from both Taylor Avenue and from Cherry Street to the south. And also due to the fact, we've talked about this before, that we do require on-site detention for every single development in the CTC. They have to find a place for detention. The south side is fully encumbered by those easements, so they chose to move it to the west side, which further restricts their placement of buildings. Both buildings are roughly 40 feet in width, so we'd have 80 feet of building frontage in total along the full frontage of Taylor, which is 198 linear feet. Staff find that with the existing lot configuration, existing easements, and the requirement for on-site detention, and the fact that 32% of the site is landscaped, including enhanced landscaping at the entrance, that the request for the waiver in this particular instance is reasonable, and we do support it. Second waiver request is specifically to allow the use of metal as an exterior cladding material. The industrial design guidelines don't outright prohibit it, but they state that it should only be used as an accent material for metal. The applicant has proposed 2 different profiles of ribbed metal paneling in 2 separate colors. Again, you can see those depicted on the screen here. After further staff review, staff went back and forth with the applicant on this particular proposal. We concluded that the metal cladding materials have become increasingly common in applications and can be architecturally appropriate when designed accordingly. They provide fire resistance. They're easily maintained, and we're seeing them more and more as a practical choice for modern construction, specifically in industrial applications, as of course in an industrial zone district. Further, and important to note, the city has permitted architectural metal cladding actually just down the street from this particular property. That would be the Spot Climbing Gym and what is now operating as John's Table. Similar consideration was given to those particular uses, in the architectural metal cladding. And so based on the fact that adjacent sites have successfully incorporated that cladding into their facade design and the widespread use of cladding as an acceptable material, staff find the request to be reasonable and consistent with previous approvals in the CTC. The applicant also took steps to include varying roof forms, articulation in the facade design, and then some additional consideration for architectural elements on the street-facing elevations, again, that are depicted on the screen here. Third waiver request is for the industrial design standard that requires street trees on the frontages. Again, you can see this particular slide here actually depicts the Goodhue Ditch easement in red, where again, plantings are fully precluded in any capacity. Again, those cottonwoods are naturally occurring in that area and the applicant is keeping them there. Then of course the green utility lines. In total, 37 trees, again, were provided on site, including 14 trees along the south side of the site, and then 9 trees along the west side. So based on the hardship prevented by the existing ditch easement and those utility lines, staff do support the request for the waiver in this location. Again, 37 trees proposed on site, which would meet the tree requirement. The tree count requirement, as is presented in the industrial design guidelines, it includes 150 low water shrubs with the indigenous low water grass mix for the utility area. Fourth and final request is one that you all have seen before. This would be a request for a reduction in the drive aisle width of 28 feet, which is required for the industrial design guidelines. The applicant has elected to take this to 26 feet. If you recall, the last hearing, we discussed one for 24 feet. The applicant is taking this to 26. This was approved by the Louisville Fire Protection District. Staff support this request. The 26-foot width also meets the requirements for Louisville Fire Protection District's minimum width for aerial apparatus access for buildings that are taller than 30 feet. So again, with the parking spaces directly adjacent, staff also support this request for a waiver. You can also see the hammerhead turnaround that was provided and required by the Fire Protection District as part of this proposal. So as part of our review, staff confirmed compliance with the LMC and the industrial design guidelines with the 4 waivers for cladding, street trees, the multi-building setback, and drive aisle width. The Planning Commission recommended approval on April 10th with the following condition. I'll read it out, which states, a note shall be added to the PUD that states the following. The details of this planned unit development shall be fully implemented in a single phase. A core and shell certificate of completion shall be issued for one building on site prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the other building. The reason we included this condition is, Mayor, you actually alluded to some of the market challenges that developers are facing at the moment. This actually gives the applicant a little more flexibility to obtain a certificate of occupancy for one of the buildings, start operating while they work on a tenant interior finish with a certificate of completion on the other building. Typically, we would require a certificate of occupancy. In order to issue a certificate of occupancy, the entirety of the PUD would have to be implemented, including the full completion of both buildings on this particular site. This particular condition allows the applicant to get the core and shell of one building up and complete. So from an exterior perspective, the site looks fully functional, and then allows the applicant to move into one building, receive a certificate of occupancy, and then continue on with their work while they finish the other building, do a tenant finish of the other building, for a CO. So certificate of completion comes with the core and shell completion. CO comes with core and shell and tenant finish completion, which actually allows folks to move in and start operating. So with that, that note was added to the PUD after the Planning Commission hearing, and staff now recommend approval of Resolution 38, Series 2025, approval of a planned unit development amendment to allow construction of 2 industrial buildings and associated site improvements at 380 South Taylor. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Why don't we, why don't we ask, we can get any questions from council. I'm going to try to go to doing that, and then having public comment after that. So, yeah, see if that works. Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
Yeah, I do have a question. It's, in general, all the waivers you've, in my opinion, presented strong cases to accept those. If we step back out of this specific application, there was one comment you made about the first waiver request with the location of the setbacks and such. And it says staff finds this requested waiver is reasonable, aligns with intent, given the inclusion of enhanced entry features. And I think you were talking about landscaping at that point. So it made me think, what are the guarantees when you give these waivers that the particular plants and tree counts and enhanced entry is actually done?
That's part of the certificate of occupancy process. So we, in order for the applicant to receive a certificate of occupancy, we do a full site-wide inspection. That includes landscaping. That's property boundary to property boundary. If the applicant does not have complete landscaping that is alive, that is the key there, we will not issue a certificate of occupancy, or we will require a collateral payment and an agreement from the applicant, if it's outside of a planting season, for example, and they will actually give us payment and contingency that covers the cost of those improvements plus labor to install those improvements. In the event that they don't install those, then we as the city can go in and install them. It also incentivizes the applicant to finish that installation so that they can get their check plus 15 to 20% back that we require to issue the CO.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. That's all.
Councilmember Fahey.
I have one question on the cottonwood trees. Considering the amount of problems that we have encountered with cottonwood trees when they become fully grown in the city, why are we letting them even keep the cottonwood trees in a ditch?
Yeah, I would say that we, obviously cottonwoods, aspens, ashes are tree species that we don't want to see planted as new trees. However, I think when we have mature trees that are present, I think we, as a staff, would place the value on the maturity of those trees. And again, it's not a requirement that the applicant retains those. So we didn't request them to remove. We didn't request the applicant to remove them just based on the fact that they are mature. So the applicant could potentially remove those at some point in the future. They would, I believe, they would still be in conformance with their overall tree plan. But we did not, to answer your question, we did not require them to remove them.
Okay, I'm just wondering about that because we did have to remove 2 cottonwood trees in Enclave Park because the roots were going down into the drainage system. And this seems like the same situation.
That's a challenge, absolutely. I will say this, that just to add to that, our parks team who and our forester and our forestry team does do reviews for us. They didn't indicate any concerns over the existing cottonwoods in this location for this particular site. Okay.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Yeah. First, one comment. So I believe that the ditch there is fully channelized in concrete. And I don't know if there's any damage to that concrete from the cottonwoods yet, but I don't know of any. So anyway, I had a question about the metal panels. Like, again, like, what was the original basis for excluding that as a majority exterior material?
Yeah, I would say we contemplated this during the Planning Commission hearing. A similar question was asked by members of the Planning Commission. I think we have to look at the adoption date of the design guidelines, and I hesitate to call out the age of our design guidelines because I think you hear me talk about that on a regular basis, but I do think that there was an aesthetic consideration when it came to prohibiting metal as a full facade material. I think if you think about buildings 20, 30 years ago that were put up with full metal exteriors, I don't believe that the some of the advancements in finishing on those materials were there, and I think they generally led to a less desirable development condition.
Right.
That would be my take, and Rob might have some.
So I've thought about this too, and I think my speculation, my best guess, considering all this, is that corrugated metal industrial buildings were pretty common at one point, and that's definitely not the aesthetic that we would want in the Colorado Tech Center. So that's just a prime example of why you wouldn't want a fully metal building, because you don't want a fully corrugated metal building. It just doesn't match they have pretty high design standards for an industrial park there.
Right.
Okay. And I'll add too, and Rob mentioned corrugated. This is ribbed. I think the product that was available primarily was corrugated, which is the wavy look. This is actually a ribbed look, which again, widely available now through the rib. So I think they've become architecturally enhanced as well. Right. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess I just had one other question. So about sidewalks, public sidewalks. So can you help me understand, what requirements are there not in the CTC or in this part of the CTC?
So I would say staff's general approach is that if we are reviewing development on a vacant property and there are public sidewalks that are directly adjacent and contiguous with that property, we will require the construction and the completion of sidewalks. I'm sure you've looked at the aerial of this particular site. I didn't include a full aerial. I thought I would get this question. I should have included it. But our Public Works Department concluded that because there are sidewalks on the south side of Cherry Street and on the west side of Taylor Avenue and no sidewalks on the north side of Cherry and the east side of Taylor, that we would not require this property owner to develop sidewalks because we'd essentially have pedestrian paths to nowhere. So
I would just add the original master plan for the CTC includes sidewalks on one side of the street. They didn't include sidewalks on both sides of the street. So we're trying to continue the sidewalks on the side where they were initiated. And all properties have to have PED connections, but some of them just end at the right of way, and you have to go to the other side of the street for the sidewalk.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, I was wondering a little bit, because like diagonally across that intersection is a vacant lot that does have full sidewalks. So I don't know how we achieve that, but yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. It's really good. Even without the overhead, that was fine. I was just curious, they were saying something about the 30-foot setback for the two buildings. The building to the north of them, does that have a 30-foot setback?
You know, I'd have to review that. I'm not sure. I would have to, it would be, the minimum setback requirement would be 30 feet. So it could have been established at a greater than 30-foot setback.
Okay.
So I don't have that answer for you.
And this is
I'm
just
sorry.
because there's going to be two buildings on that property instead of just one?
Yes, correct.
And if it had been just one, is it like a 20-foot setback or something?
No, I'm sorry. The 30-foot setback would apply regardless.
Oh.
What the design standard states that if there are two buildings, the setbacks have to be staggered.
Oh, I get it.
And I would contemplate that the reasoning for that is it generally creates more visual interest along a street frontage when you have a varied setback.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it would be appropriate with maybe a longer building frontage and a longer street frontage. I mean, we have buildings in the CTC right now that are 400 linear feet with one straight facade on one property, but because they're not two separate buildings, they don't have to be staggered. And so again, this relatively small site, so that would be the intent of the design standard.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Copeland.
Yeah, one further little question. So about the requirement from the Planning Commission. So what would be typical? Would it be typical for not to give a certificate of occupancy for either building until both of them have tenant finishes?
Correct. I would say that if we don't specify at this stage in the development process how those buildings will be finished and completed, we would default to our standard process, which would be full completion of the PUD, which would be full completion of both of those buildings. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to guarantee that those buildings would be completed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, why don't we take any public comment that we might have? Okay, we'll take it then back to council for the questions and comments. I had a question about the resolution, actually. I did not, and bear with me for just a second. Yeah, I don't see any reference to the note that you were talking about. Do we need to add that?
In the council resolution specifically,
Yeah.
it wasn't referenced because it was a condition of Planning Commission and was implemented between Planning Commission and City Council, and the PUD that you have right now that was presented in the staff packet includes the note. The original PUD that went to Commission did not.
All right, very good. Right, this, just as a side note, this sounds like I mean, I'm hearing a pattern in these, that there are some pieces of the IDDSG that seem to be kind of out of date. And I don't think that's any big deal, except to say that it seems inequitable if we don't approve a similar kind of change here. I do remember the days when people tried to do corrugated buildings and things, and those are not, they're pretty unsightly, and this stuff is a lot better. We used to get, when I was on planning commission, we used to get the whole, block full of all the materials. We don't do that anymore, but it's probably just as well that we don't do that, actually. But anyway, can we get a motion? If there's no further comments.
I move to approve resolution number 38, series 2025.
Second.
Any further comments?
I just wanted to make one comment as a thank you for the conscientious nature of the plantings, being low water and no junipers in this plan, so a little bit more fire-wise. Thank you so much.
Councilmember.
Just, Mayor, could I make a quick comment?
Yes, absolutely. Councilmember Hefner.
Just to appreciate the Planning Commission for their good work, detailed recommendation, and helpful condition.
Yeah.
Amen. Councilmember Cooperman.
Yeah, I would second that on the Planning Commission's work and their condition of approval. I think that all the waivers being requested are quite reasonable, and so I will support this application.
And I would, I'd support both the application for the reasons that are stated in the staff report, as well as the reasons for the waivers. So let's see, on this one, I think we need a roll call vote.
Councilmember Kern.
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Yes.
Councilmember Hefner.
Yes.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Yes.
Mayor Lay.
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey.
Yes.
Very good. All right. The next item on business is ordinance number 1897, series 2025, an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Louisville Municipal Code concerning parking minimums for multifamily and adaptive reuse development. This is a first reading to set a public hearing. So tonight we're going to be hearing the staff report for the ordinance. We're not going to be opening public hearing or taking public comment. Again, council members can ask questions, suggest amendments, or instruct staff to provide further information. Can we get a staff report?
Absolutely. Thank you again, Mayor, councilors, Matt Post, Senior Planner, Community Development Team. This is a first reading, an ordinance that will be coming for second reading, amending Title 17 of the LMC concerning parking minimums for multifamily and adaptive reuse development. I'll try to keep this brief. I pulled some analysis out of this, but I do have some of those slides at the end of the presentation if necessary for just some additional staff analysis as we move through this. So this ordinance is a direct result of House Bill 24-1304, which was adopted by the Colorado General Assembly in 2024. The bill requires local governments that are part of a metropolitan planning organization to eliminate minimum parking requirements for new multifamily and for residential adaptive reuse developments within areas referred to as applicable transit service areas. The city of Louisville is located within a metropolitan planning organization. That would be DRCOG. We are a member government of DRCOG. And there are a total of 44 transit stops within the city that are identified as applicable transit service areas by the bill. As written, local governments within MPOs, metropolitan planning organizations, are prohibited from enforcing parking minimums as of June 30th. So we can no longer enforce parking minimums in the ATSAs, the applicable transit service areas, at the end of this month. The bill, House Bill 24-1304, applies to properties within the city that at least partially intersect with areas that are identified as having applicable transit service. You can see the slide on the screen is a map that was prepared by our GIS department using data that was provided to us by DOLA of the state identified transit service areas. The dots are the actual transit stops. The buffers are the quarter-mile buffer that applies with the actual bill. We'll talk about that further. Applicable transit service areas are identified as transit stops within a quarter mile of a transit stop that provides service at intervals of 30 minutes or less during peak transit hours. Here in the city of Louisville, our qualifying lines would include the Dash Route that serves the Boulder Corridor, the Flatiron Flyer that stops at the US 36 in McCaslin Station, and then also the 228, RTD 228, actually applies, and it runs on a section of Via Appia. So again, you can see those service areas depicted here. Those areas were developed by DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs, in concert with CDOT, the Colorado Energy Office, and RTD. And again, 44 of those are in the city. So within these ATSAs, the city may no longer enforce parking minimums for new multifamily developments, and then again, adaptive reuse residential developments where 50% of the floor area, at least 50% of the floor area is residential. This would also apply to new mixed-use developments that contain a residential use, although we can still require parking for commercial uses in a new mixed-use development. We can no longer require parking for the residential portion of mixed-use developments, so long as those mixed-use developments would fall under the definition of a multi-family unit or a multi-unit use. Adaptive reuse, so again, adaptive reuse are one of those uses that we cannot require parking for, is defined in the bill as an existing structure for which the use was originally constructed, where a new use is proposed that maintains the elements of the existing structure. So it's just again, the reuse of an existing building to a new use. With this ordinance, it is very important to note that a developer may still voluntarily provide parking within those applicable transit service areas. Again, we are just now prohibited from enforcing those parking minimums. We can talk about that a bit more as an analysis. I pulled that out of this particular, some detailed analysis about that, but we can talk more about what staff's opinion is on how that will play out. Some additional background on the bill: the prohibition of parking minimums for the listed uses in applicable transit service areas of the law specifically clarifies that nothing prevents a local jurisdiction from requiring parking compliance associated with affordable housing conditions. This would be a scenario where the city or a developer has received funding for affordable housing, and as a condition of that funding, minimum parking is required. It's relatively common. In that particular scenario, we can still require a parking minimum so that the applicant can meet the minimum standards of their funding requirements. The law also does not prevent a local jurisdiction from requiring bicycle parking on site, and it does not prevent a local jurisdiction from requiring accessible or ADA spaces or electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The caveat being that we can only require ADA and EV spaces when parking is voluntarily provided. We can no longer mandate that those be required as part of the development. As far as an ADA standard is concerned, there are some building code implications where there are some cases where a developer may propose an ADA accessible dwelling unit within a multi-unit or a multi-family housing complex. In that particular scenario, the applicant would have to provide ADA parking for that accessible unit. And obviously we could mandate it at that point, but again, I did clarify this point with DOLA before we put this together. We can only require ADA and EV spaces if they're voluntarily provided. So we did confirm that. Moving on here, multifamily is not defined in the law. So again, the law specifically states that we're prohibited from enforcing minimums on multifamily projects. DOLA provided guidance on the law indicating that we may utilize our own definition so long as it does not deviate too much or substantially from the state definition. The state definition and the city definition are almost identical. The definition specifically, or our definition rather, is a building of multifamily is a building used by 2 or more families living independently of each other in separate dwelling units that does not include hotel or motel uses. So it's a relatively broad definition. Again, that is almost identical to the state's definition, which is more than one family or dwelling unit in a structure. So staff elected not to update our definition of multifamily or multi-unit in this particular ordinance update. So with the proposal, staff are proposing updates to Chapter 17, specifically 1720, off-street parking. Key updates include a new subsection in 1720-10F, which will prohibit the enforcement of off-street parking for qualifying projects in applicable transit service areas, and a provision indicating that a new subsection supersedes any existing design guidelines and standards, in addition to existing PUDs and GDPs. So again, this new language that we're adding will supersede any other parking requirements or parking ratio standards that are present in our design guidelines, including commercial design guidelines, mixed-use design guidelines, and then also any parking that would have been entitled as part of a GDP, an existing general development plan, or a planned unit development. If the development portion, if a development has not been implemented and they're utilizing what was previously entitled. Again, so long as they are in the applicable transit service areas, right? Not citywide, just in the applicable transit service areas. We're also proposing to revise section 1720, just another section there that will again reference the new section that we've created, clarifying that the entirety of another off-street parking section does not apply where parking is exempt under that original section that we just mentioned. We'll also update downtown parking standards. The entirety of downtown is located within an applicable transit service area. And so again, any multi-unit use will not be required to provide minimum parking in downtown. And so with that, I ended the presentation here, but I do have some analysis. I think it would be helpful to go through some of staff's thoughts.
Please do.
Okay. So again, moving into some analysis, June 30th is that date for us. Regardless of adoption, we can no longer enforce on June 30th. We did dig into our policy documents just to determine whether or not we had previously approved and considered support for reduction of parking minimums. This is in your staff report, but we found that the housing plan does generally align with and support the state's efforts to reduce minimum parking, and more specifically, the city housing plan identified that minimum parking requirements are a significant barrier to providing additional housing in the city. There's more detail in the staff report. The study indicates that parking minimums generally increase development costs. They reduce buildable area, as we know, on already constrained sites, and then negatively impact the feasibility of projects, especially in areas near transit or where parking demand is generally lower. The study included modeling as part of the feasibility analysis and demonstrated that reduced parking requirements had a greater positive impact on multifamily project viability than allowing increased building heights. As an example, the study modeled scenarios and found that when parking was reduced from 1.4 to 1 space per unit, the corresponding modeling revealed that the reduction yielded higher residual land values, and those higher residual land values thereby improved the financial feasibility of those particular projects and increased the likelihood that they actually moved forward to completion in most circumstances. So again, our housing study actually recommends lower parking ratios, and it actually recommends parking-related incentives, specifically in transit corridors and in downtown Louisville, those transit corridors highlighted in the housing plan and in downtown Louisville directly coincide with the applicable transit service areas that are identified in the state bill. And so again, just some additional analysis here. You know, staff, although we may no longer enforce parking minimums, we do anticipate that most eligible projects will continue to include off-street parking. There's a few reasons for that. This expectation is supported by, first and foremost, I think many conversations that myself, Rob, others in the planning department have had with developers where we've actually attempted to get them to reduce their parking on site. And a lot of times what we get in response from them is this: we need this parking as a market tool. Our market feasibility analyses show that we need parking here specifically in a suburban community like the city of Louisville. And I say suburban, it's compared to a more dense urban environment where we have rail or something along those lines. And then also too, again, as a condition of funding, right? So when we talk to a lot of these groups, similar to the affordable housing piece, most of the lenders that you'll see, construction lenders, parking is a minimum requirement for a lot of those folks as a condition of funding. So I think the practical realities of on-the-ground development in the city of Louisville we will continue to see, we anticipate that we will continue to see parking provided when we see new developments come in, again, to retain market feasibility. And I think we'll have frank conversations with groups about that when those moments arise for us to address. Let's see here. Let me just take a look at a couple more items. The other item to consider there is, of course, potential concerns. You know, there is the potential risk of spillover parking in adjacent neighborhoods and commercial areas. I added an item on this in the staff report. Of course, any impacts at this point will remain unknown. Staff don't necessarily have an idea of what that may look like. I think what we'll do is just continue to monitor those situations. They'll be impacted by ongoing market behavior and decisions by developers. Then we can consider policy responses if we see those negative impacts. So with that, that does conclude the presentation. I tried to keep that to a first reading level. I apologize if that seemed a bit disjointed. I didn't want to get too much into the details on that, but happy to answer any questions at this point.
I'll start it off. I thought your presentation was terrific. I'm not gonna, it's just what we needed. I'm trying to think of situations where a developer wouldn't voluntarily provide parking. You've provided good reasons why that just doesn't happen, period, or rarely happens. I guess I'm wondering if anywhere in Louisville we've ever had, we've had parking minimums. So I'm sort of thinking about that in the future because I do have concerns about the ADA piece in that kind of situation. I find it somewhat difficult to believe DOLA's, I mean, I don't do a lot of Title III ADA work, but I have done some, and it's kind of astonishing to me that that there wouldn't be some tension there at the very least. But I'll take what you're saying as the premise that we're going or that we're dealing with. But is there likely to be any kind of development that might be proposed that wouldn't have parking provided?
You know, I can't contemplate a project that would be more than 2 units that would be new that would not provide parking. But again, obviously hard to elaborate on that. I can work on some of my experience here working in other jurisdictions that are more urban, more urbanized, and did have rail directly adjacent to sites. Even in those particular situations recently, I've been on staff for 18 months now, but even in situations where groups came in directly adjacent to rail, parking was still provided. where they could actually, again, had significant reductions or could have requested less. That's an anecdote for regional development patterns, but I would have a hard time imagining we
I mean,
wouldn't see
I'm
parking.
asking you to speculate, and
Yeah.
I appreciate your answer based on that. But, it just occurred to me. I think as a practical matter, it's probably just not something we need to be too worried about. Let's see if we have other questions from other council members. I actually, the first one raising his hand was Councilmember Hefner, so let's start with them.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the presentation. Just one question, which is, I understand that other jurisdictions looking at this have done broader elimination of parking minimums, that I think Longmont has eliminated them for all categories of development, and Boulder and Denver are looking likely to follow suit. Did staff consider a broader change to the ordinance to further reduce parking minimums?
We did not study a full citywide elimination of parking minimums, Counselor.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilmember.
Yeah, I also want to thank you for the presentation. It was very good. My question is, well, there's two, actually. One is, what happens to properties that are currently vacant but are not within a transit stop, but then the bus changes its route and adds a route that puts them in a transit stop area?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would if the service is not ongoing and hasn't been identified by DOLA as being an eligible service, then we would continue to apply parking minimums until we've received an update of new or revised transit service that would bring that property, or rather make that property eligible for prohibition on parking minimums.
Okay, and then my other question is very short. With an existing property that's within the bus stop area that has way too much parking, would they be required to remove it?
There would be no requirement for removal of existing parking.
So no requirements on existing properties?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll elaborate on that further, just because it would be the natural next question, and if in my head at least, is if we did get an applicant that came in to adaptively reuse an existing building, there is nothing in the bill that would prohibit them from retaining that parking that's there. So just a note as well. Yep.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, Matt, I quite enjoy your presentations. You are very, very good at what you do. And I appreciate how you're able to thread together a story for us so clearly. So never apologize for the time you take at that podium, because I find it very helpful in your staff reports as well. So with that being said, travel with me to Northwest Parkway, the east side of RTR, technically Broomfield. I believe there might be some bus stops in that area. Now, it's outside our jurisdiction, but if that RTR property is within a quarter mile, would they, I know the GDP right now doesn't allow residential and everything, but would they fall under the other jurisdiction?
That work? Yeah, the buffer obviously exists regardless of jurisdictional lines. So there was no eligible transit stop along 96th where it turns into 470 that would have made Red Tail Ridge eligible.
Okay, so you did look at surrounding
we ran the
jurisdictions
whole-
if they could.
Yeah, absolutely. We ran any buffer that would have come into our jurisdiction.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Councilmember Cooper.
Follow up to that last question. So the 228 goes all the way down via Appia and all the way down McCaslin, but I assume that Is it because it's only hourly that it doesn't count?
I believe so, yeah. So the 220, so it's on Via Appia, it stops in 30-minute intervals. South of Via Appia, down to McCaslin, down to the Flatirons Mall, and then up into Lafayette, the service is not every 30 minutes, yeah.
Okay. And, okay, so I think I had one or two other little questions. So I assume, just a kind of a clarification, so in our definition of multifamily or multi-unit, we reference family, and I assume that references our updated definition of family, our recently updated definition of family?
Can you bear with me while I look at that definition? Let me find that here.
So yeah, I think in the context of the definition of multifamily dwelling, then that works together with our updated definition of family.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just one other question. So presumably the state bill doesn't say anything about on-street parking. Do our codes say anything about requirements around on-street parking, or?
To answer the first part of your question, no, you're correct. The state bill does not mention on-street parking. It's specifically off-street. Our code does not address on-street parking. However, there are certain allowances in some of our design guidelines, specifically our mixed-use design guidelines, that allow properties to satisfy their visitor parking standards with on-street parking. But the general approach is that on-street parking does not satisfy off-street standards. Then obviously most local streets within the city would be eligible for on-street parking unless otherwise signed by our public works team.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any other questions, comments, requests for further information? One of the things that I don't, is just kind of an adjunct, but it strikes me that one of the challenges with the state's imposition of, or supplanting really of our local authority is that our citizens get unhappy with that. I recognize that we don't have any control over that at this point. That is the fact that our citizens may complain and disagree with and for all I know, council members may disagree with parts of these that we're addressing, is not going to make a difference. We need to address these in our ordinances, or we need to have a bunch of non-compliant ordinances that we can't enforce, which it seems pointless. But I wonder if staff might consider thinking a little bit about what, if any, public education might be in order. I am trying to think of what the implications of this are for, neighborhoods and, in the fact is that this isn't going to affect the whole city. There is an inequity about that, right? I'm not sure we're interested in expanding these requirements, beyond what the legislature requires. But I certainly think there's probably going to be some grousing, maybe as projects come forward, about that. There's not much we can really do about that. But I think presuming that some form of this ordinance is likely to happen, it might be good to think a little bit about how that might be accomplished. It's, that's something, strictly speaking, is not completely before us, but I think it's an implication and just something to think about. Are there any other comments?
Yes.
Yes, Councilmember Hefner.
Yeah, thank you. So, further to my question, I am actually interested in at least considering whether to make this a little broader. And the reasons are a few. First, that is what a lot of so at least some of our peer jurisdictions are doing. And second, I think there are some good policy reasons to think about it. We have pretty high, I think, parking requirements. For example, for retail use, you need 2 parking spaces for every 300 square feet of retail space, which means that you actually need more square footage of parking than you do of actual available space for your business, assuming a parking spot is 180, 200 plus square feet, plus the rest of the parking lot space to drive around and so on, which to me seems pretty difficult. And we have vast oceans of unused parking that we've created as a result of these minimums. So it seems to me that as long as we're taking this up, we should think about what other reforms might make sense to our parking minimums. I for one, would think about eliminating them, recognizing that we are typically not in the best position to understand how much parking a particular project might require, and that the project proponents and financing parties and users and tenants are probably collectively much more able to understand their parking needs than we are. So I would be interested in consideration of that on second reading, and certainly welcome reactions to that thought.
Councilmember Kern.
I'm just going to second what Councilmember Hamilton said. Appreciate the all of the presentations that you do. I did have one question. Can you refresh my memory? What is the current minimum parking requirement for a multi-housing building?
It varies. I would have to look it up, but it depends on whether it's in our MUR district, whether it's downtown. I don't know if, do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. We'll look it up and get you exact count. I think it's like in the mixed use district, it might be 1 per unit. Sometimes it's per bedroom in multifamily units, but we can get you an exact number.
It is 1 to 2 per unit or 1.5 per, somewhere in that number. Yeah, it's in there, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'd be interested to know, just to understand, and then it would be interesting to see once we do enact this, if you have requests that come in and we see a change in the requests for the amount of parking for properties. I was thinking of one property in particular in Louisville, the Center Court property off of South Boulder Road. And I can't quite exactly tell if it would actually fit into this or not, but they did a really cool underground parking garage many years ago when it was like kind of affordable. And, but they charge a lot of money to use it. So there are a lot of residents who don't pay to use the parking that is provided, required, because we don't say, you can't charge for it, so they don't use the parking. And so there are a lot of resident cars that I have seen that fill the actual business property because the businesses were required, to Councilmember Hefner's point, the businesses were required to have a lot of parking spaces, probably more than is needed except on a fabulous like grand opening like we did for Shamrock Foods, just to plug a little. So I'm curious to see how all of this works out and what we actually do require now. Not that we won't continue this on to the second reading, but it would be just, I think, valuable statistical information for us in how to balance doing this. Thank you.
We have, I will add, it's close to a 1-to-1 ratio. You will be seeing some projects relatively shortly that may take advantage or would be eligible to take advantage, rather. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. If I can just add a couple more things, Mayor Couch, if that's okay. There's one item here that I wanted to make sure you all are aware of that's part of the bill. There is actually an opt-out option for us in the bill. It wasn't necessarily brought up because it's a very burdensome requirement. you could, I won't speculate on why, what it is, but essentially what it states in the bill is that we may, as a jurisdiction, adopt a provision that allows us to require parking for projects in applicable transit service areas of 20 units or more. However, the burden is then on the city to show that not requiring parking would have a significant and impactful detriment on the surrounding area. We talked about it as a staff. It would be difficult to show that. We would then also have an annual reporting requirement to DOLA, where we'd have to detail and we'd have to provide a report in detail for every instance where we actually required parking. And so again, we felt that it was a pretty significant staff burden to bring that provision in. I just want to make sure you are all aware that that is an option of the bill. But I mean, we would probably have to talk about additional staffing to support something like that. I mean, I don't want to speculate. I don't lead the department, but I think it's that level of reporting.
Just to answer your question, Councilmember Kern, our baseline multifamily in the zoning code standard is 2 parking spaces for each multifamily dwelling unit. In the mixed-use district, it's a little more complicated. For a 1-bedroom unit, it's 1 space minimum, 1.25 spaces maximum per 1-bedroom unit. For a 2-bedroom unit or more, it's 2 spaces per unit. And then there is 1 additional space required for every 8 dwelling units as guest parking. That's the mixed-use district.
Right, there's also the guest parking, visitor parking requirement to contend with as well, right? What about that, yeah.
Am I right that the litigation that's been filed by, I think, 6 jurisdictions against the state covers or is challenging the parking minimum part of this particular measure, or am I wrong about that?
I am familiar on the periphery. I believe the primary challenge would be 1313 and the housing opportunity goals that were associated with 1313. So Westminster, Arvada, a few other ones that have signed on to that. I don't know that it's directly related to the parking minimums bill. I'd have to look at that.
I just can't remember offhand.
I don't know. I know it is primarily 1313 for sure, though. I do know that because it does references the housing opportunity goal, which is part of 1313.
Yeah, I was going to turn back to Councilmember Hefner and ask, are you or did you intend to make a specific ask for an amendment or a draft amendment, or are you looking for just further discussion?
Yeah, I think the request would be, assuming there's other support, for an amendment that brings us in line with what Longmont, Boulder, and Denver are doing on parking. And, maybe some additional analysis around the impacts of such an amendment, but obviously subject to the support of this group. I don't want to send staff on a goose chase.
How much work would Councilmember Hefner's suggestion entail? Would it?
Yeah, I'll add that. So Longmont eliminated parking minimums in May of last year, May 2024. They were the first city in the state of Colorado to do it, the first non-coastal city actually to do it. Boulder just implemented theirs, I believe, this May, and Denver is currently in the process. They haven't formally adopted it. So I do believe that we would probably need some parameters to review. For example, I would have to imagine that I would prefer I'm trying to consider generating a map that would show where all multi-unit development or multi-unit proposals are permitted. But I think, Councilor Hefner, you want to go further than that and just eliminate altogether, correct?
Yeah, that would be where I'm going, is just eliminate all parking minimums for all uses across the city.
I think, thank you for clarifying. I think that we could start with Longmont as a base to see how they implemented what they looked like, maybe reach out to some Longmont staff to see what their impacts have been so far. I think 1 year may not be enough to know how that actually plays out, but I'd be happy to work on something that would get close to that.
And just for clarification, I might have missed it. Are you asking us just to bring back an alternative ordinance that would do that? Or do you want background analysis related to that in addition?
I think the ask would be for, assuming it's doable, some amendment language along with the analysis.
Okay, and then, so yeah, we could look at what other cities have done it and if there's any, related feedback from those cities, which I think is what Matt was talking about. And then there's probably some literature on this as well, I'm sure, like from American Planning Association or something. We can come up with some of that for you all.
Let me get a little bit of input from our city attorney here.
Thanks, Mayor. If I can make a suggestion, House Bill 241304 has a date in it after June 30th, 2025, which is, the end of this month. The city cannot require these parking minimums. If you move forward with the ordinance that you have in front of you and also provide direction for staff to bring back information for you to consider, you can look at another ordinance to expand it, make it more broad, however you want to proceed on a broader scale. But, I'm concerned that we address what is immediately required of us by the end of this month.
Thanks. I think that I certainly believe that that's a good policy direction myself. I guess to Councilor Hefner, how does that affect your thinking, if at all?
Yeah, so two things. First, I think what I had in mind is keep the ordinance on second reading, I think, as drafted, but have an amendment ready to go, such that if we want to adopt it with an amendment, we can. But recognizing that we sort of need to move expeditiously, and we may choose to adopt it without the amendment. And then secondly, I don't really want to send our staff off on an amendment drafting exercise if there isn't, at least one or two more folks who think this is worth looking into. I think directionally what we have in front of us is better than what we have now. And certainly we'll be supporting it either way. I just think we could go further.
Let me make one. I mean, I'm more inclined to go and keep things narrow for the purpose of getting through this ordinance change. I also think I'm thinking that there may be alternatives for dealing with the issue. I mean, one of them is revisiting our parking minimums and reducing those. I mean, there is some wisdom in sort of dealing with this particular ordinance, or maybe amendments to this ordinance and expanding it to everything, but there may be some reason why we might not want to proceed on areas that aren't within the mapped area by reducing parking minimums as a separate issue. I think it's not all or nothing, and there may be, it's hard for me to agree to just one amendment. That might be good to come forward. I think there probably are other options, and I just think we may be trying to bite off too much. We've got two staff members that are the city manager.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the city manager for 10.
Yeah, I was just going to defer to Rob, actually, because in terms of bringing forward the amendment as an alternative, I think that it would be difficult for staff to do the research that's required to be able to really identify the potential impacts. And so to keep this on schedule, I would recommend that we continue with the ordinance as proposed and give staff additional time to do the research, and then bring forward as a future item for council consideration an amendment to the ordinance. But I would defer to Rob because this impacts his department.
Yeah, I think I was going to recommend something similar, and thank you, City Attorney Kelly, because I think it's similar to that tract, is maybe having a discussion direction as a separate item, separate from the ordinance. And I think the more I'm thinking about it here, we need to review what those other cities do. I think it's probably a little more complicated than just saying we're eliminating parking. We also don't want somebody to come in and overpark. So some cities have actually made parking maximums instead of parking minimums, and that might be a policy that we want to consider or mix in. So there's a lot to consider, and I think the key is council interested in this as a whole, going beyond what we're doing now? And if so, we would try to work it into our, the work plan, because we do have a full plate, so I think we'd have to go back to the drawing board and try to bring this as soon as we could, but I wouldn't want to commit to a particular date if that's okay with council.
All that said, well, one thought is just to make a motion, and then we can kind of proceed from there. But I'll take.
If I could just add one other thing too, is we do have our development code rewrite scheduled. You will be seeing a scope for that, I believe, before the end of this year, and we would kick that off, as soon as possible after the comprehensive plan update. That could address this issue as well. Again, that's a big project, so I just want you to be aware of that. It could be addressed through that if you were willing to wait, but if you want to do something sooner, then we would need to bring back discussion direction sooner than that.
Councilmember Cooperman.
I had one little question first. We've reviewed a few different ordinances that have come down from the state essentially, and it seemed like in other cases there were actually sort of penalties or something if we didn't adopt the ordinance in time. Whereas with this one, is there really a penalty if we don't adopt the ordinance by the 30th, or is it just that, we can have these parking minimums on the books, we just can't enforce them?
I think our intent is, even though the effective date would go past that, if a project came in, we wouldn't enforce the minimums.
Right.
Okay. I'll just add to, Councilor, if that's okay, I mean, the language of the bill, and I'll obviously defer to Kathleen on this one, but, specifically states that we shall not enact nor enforce our local laws that establish minimum parking by that June 30th date. The second piece there, too, that's in your staff report where, I'll stop there. I'm sorry. I'll stop there. Sorry.
I mean, the fact is, go ahead.
Sure. So I'll just say, generally speaking, I'm quite interested in the ideas that Councilmember Hefner has put forward. I do think it's probably too rushed to try to get something into this ordinance. There's maybe a middle ground we could consider, where we maybe add a little bit more to this ordinance, but not address the whole city.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. So I'm in agreement with the plan to move forward with the ordinance as is and address Councilmember Hefner's additional analysis at a later point in time. I personally am fine waiting for the code rewrite. I don't see a sense of urgency around this right now. Someone can convince me otherwise, because correct me if I'm wrong, staff, someone can come to us through the waiver process to request a lower amount of parking at this point in time. That's our current process. Okay, so, given that it's a relatively new concept in our state, it's relatively large cities that have done this thus far, pretty different from Louisville. I'm okay giving it a little time and maybe folding it into the rewrite, because I don't know that I'm willing to give up something we currently have on the work plan for staff for this. So I'll just leave it at that.
Councilmember Kern.
I'm just going to say I agree with the entirety of the statement that Councilmember Hamilton just made.
All right then.
Mayor,
Councilmember Hefner.
briefly, I am perfectly agreeable to pushing this off a little bit. My preference would be to not wait for the land use code rewrite, just given that's pretty far off into the future. And the reason, sort of the broader reason I think this is important is it falls within some of our core priorities around not only housing, but economic vitality in terms of encouraging small business and not making them pay what frankly is a huge amount of money to build unnecessary parking spaces. And through our lens of sustainability that, I think we're trying to encourage folks to consider alternative transportation where possible and as able. This one seems like the type of targeted land use code reform that would fit neatly with some of the other things we've been doing. And while I don't need it to happen as part of adoption of this ordinance, I'd love to see it happen relatively soon.
I think just from a procedural standpoint, what we could do on the issue of how soon and what the scope of discussion direction might be is maybe we can deal with that in potential future agenda items at the end. I think it's a good time to raise that. I don't think we don't need to do it strictly speaking in connection with action on the ordinance. At least that's my take on that. Any other? Councilmember Hefner, how do you feel about that?
Sorry, what's the benefit of discussing it a second time later?
No. I mean, the issue that we've been talking around about perhaps expanding or reviewing further the parking minimums, and we're just talking about that. And I'm just suggesting we do that a little bit later in the meeting because we've got an ordinance in front of us. That's all.
That is what I was asking about. I think we've just had the conversation. And for example, I might make a motion that we schedule the public hearing on the ordinance as drafted, and also direct staff to come back as time permits with an analysis of making it broader.
Yeah, I think my only concern about that is, you can do you want to make a motion to that effect?
Yes. Let me just find my agenda here. So I would move that, let's see here, we set the public hearing for ordinance number 1897, series 2025 for, can somebody fill me in?
What's the date? Clerk.
Well, the date will depend on if you're amending this ordinance or not. Because we're not. Okay, Rob, is there any reason it can't come back on the 17th? June 17th, 2025.
If that's the end of the motion, I have a friendly amendment.
So, well,
it's not the end of the motion.
Okay.
So on June, so it's on June 17th is the proposal. And this is a zoning ordinance amendment?
That's what I was asking you.
Okay, sorry, you mean from a spacing of no, I don't think it can.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, so I think there's special noticing requirements for zoning that wouldn't allow it to come back that quickly. I don't know what they are.
So then it would have to come back on July 8th.
Right.
2025.
Is there are you making a motion?
So I'm in the middle of my motion. So to set the public hearing for July 8th, 2025 at 6 p.m. and also direct staff to come back to us at some point in the future as they determine with further analysis of what we might do to make this this policy more broadly applicable to parking across the city.
Is there a second?
May I offer a friendly amendment to the motion? And that is to also adopt the ordinance on first reading.
I accept the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we do that? Adopt the ordinance on first reading?
That is the procedure. You
well,
make a
no,
motion to adopt the ordinance on first reading
understand.
and set the public hearing. The motion started with the public hearing and
Understand. No, I
passed
get
over
what
the
you're saying
first
now.
part of that.
I thought you were suggesting we were going to obviate the need for a second reading, and that would be a problem. But yeah, that's the issue before us tonight is that.
So, and just to be clear, because that was a little choppy, the motion on the table is to bring this back on second reading as drafted for a up or down vote. And then as time permits, get some additional analysis on what else we might do.
You're suggesting, correct me if I'm wrong, July 8th, right?
Well, that's the date I heard from our staff, but I am not attached to any particular date.
If we move, and if we were to move and agree to pass the ordinance on first reading, we could set a public hearing, couldn't we not, in June? I mean, it's only if we amend it, right?
Director Zuccaro said that there's a special notice provision. I have the
So
code up. I don't know what it
Right, so
is.
anytime we've adopted, and again, I apologize, I wasn't prepared for this. I think anytime we do a zoning ordinance amendment, that there's I thought there was a notice requirement between first and second reading that required them to be spaced apart. I do not know what it is. I apologize if I'm really confusing things here. I just was trying to be cautious. I could try to find it as well.
Here's what I might suggest. We haven't had a second to the motion, so we ought to, before we have maybe further discussion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
What do you have it at?
If we can do it, my suggestion is 8:15. I thought we were going to get this done a little bit earlier. We can take a few minutes. Perhaps we can resolve that issue of the notice. So it would be nice. My thought is that it would be nice to get this done before June 30th if we can. I think that's what staff is. That's the way it came to us in order to, not just conform to the law, but, it's on the books before the deadline for non-enforcement. So could we take a few minutes? Is there a likelihood, a reasonable likelihood we could get that information that is in question about the zoning requirement?
I think so.
Okay. Why don't we take a brief recess in the middle of the public hearing? Or not the public hearing, excuse me, the hearing and the further discussion on it for that. We'll be back in 8:22, 5 minutes. we can resume discussion. When last we met, we had a motion on the table and a second, and we were having discussion. I think one of the questions was, when can we set the public hearing? It appears that we need to set the public hearing no earlier than July 8th, 2025 at 6 p.m. So, Councilmember Hefner has disappeared for the moment. I was going to make a quick friendly amendment, but I don't know the way to. Is that the date he used? Okay. All right. So, well, we have 5 of us, so there's no chance of, now there's a chance of a 3-3. All right. All right. Can we have a roll? Does everybody know what they're voting on?
Should we restate it since we just came back from break in case someone online?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Councilmember Hefner, would you like to do that?
Sorry, I lost audio there for a moment. Can you repeat what you said?
Councilmember Hamilton made the good point that maybe we should restate the motion, even though we are about to vote on it, maybe especially because we're about to vote on it, so that the viewing public and the record can clearly reflect what we're about to vote on.
Okay, so let me take a swing at it here. I move that we adopt on first reading ordinance number 1897, series 2025, and set the public hearing for, did we decide on a new date?
July 8th.
July 8th, 2025 at 6 p.m. And in connection therewith, direct our staff to separately come back to us as time permits with an analysis of, discussion. Sorry, hang on, I got the YouTube audio. To come back to us with an analysis of whether and to what extent we might do other things to broaden the applicability of the reduction or elimination of parking minimums across the city.
Okay. Let's take a roll call.
Second?
Oh, I think it's, we'll restate it. Go ahead. Second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right. Call the roll, if you would.
Councilmember Kern,
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Hefner,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooperman,
Yes.
Mayor Lay,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Passes, and wait the public hearing for the next time we get together on July 8th. Moving to the last item, it is Louisville Center for the Arts digital sign. Do we have a staff presentation on that? I think you need to turn it on. There we go.
Okay. Yes. Hello. Good evening, Mayor Lay and members of council. My name is Iris. I'm the Arts and Events Program Manager, and I am here to. Oh, hold on. Will it be up here?
Was it on the desktop? Was it on the jump drive by any chance?
It was on the drive for the whole meeting. Onto this computer? Oh, no, I just dropped it in the folder. Sorry. First time.
Was it long time listener, first time caller?
That and some will remember my opening line from the CML presentation that I did where I quoted Brené Brown about first times. But anyway, we are being recorded now, so I'm not going to repeat what I said that day. But I think Sema Fox probably remembers that presentation.
She's going to throw it on a jump drive here real quick and get it over to the computer.
Okay. Back in Zoom days, Councilmember Fahey would have told us a joke that was like really bad, but came from a young man, so we gave her leeway. But I'm not going to force you into that right now.
Okay, and then to make it go onto the screen. It is opened.
I mean, it is up, sitting there. Maybe just go ahead and go verbally. Yeah.
It might be screen sharing. You might be able to like throw it to another screen. Can you do that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's screen
Okay.
sharing.
Awesome.
And then you can like look at your mouse over here.
All right, let's start all over again. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Iris. I'm the Arts and Events Program Manager, and I'm going to be presenting a proposal for a new sign for the Louisville Center for the Arts. This proposal was developed with guidance from Cultural Services and also input from Parks and Planning departments in the city. And the sign that we're proposing does include a digital message board. That's the special part about the sign. And it would be displaying information about the programming that is going to be taking place at the Arts Center at any given point in time. And our intention with having the digital element is to increase awareness about programming that's happening at the Arts Center and hopefully also increase the audience for everybody, like for all those events that happen there. So I did develop some slides to familiarize you with the whole project. The old sign, which is sort of kind of visible in that photo, being a little inconspicuous, was destroyed by a storm last November, which broke the tree and then consequently the sign. Once that happened, the former Director of Cultural Services, Sharon Nemechek, let me know that we're going to have to replace the sign and suggested that we kind of make it a new and improved sign with this digital element. I thought that was a great idea because so far I've done maybe 15 events at the Arts Center, and I consistently get people who were completely unaware of the Arts Center's function or didn't know that there was constant programming happening in the building. And then I thought about, the sign at Louisville Middle School, which I thought was kind of a comparable example of something that we could have for the Arts Center. Then I went ahead and collected 3 different quotes and renderings for what this art sign might look like. The one that we chose together in Cultural Services is by Artcraft Sign Company, and it's quoted at about $22,000. They recently re-quoted me, so this is a couple $100s lower than what they originally provided. So they've been putting a lot of effort to give us the best price. And Artcraft is also the company that does the signs for all of the parks around the city, the rec center sign. They're all done by the same company, so this sign would be design-wise matching all the other signage around the city, which I think would be an improvement compared to the wooden sign that we had before. I think, yep, that's all. prior discussions, you can see the sign broken. We went through several channels to make sure that we have approval and understand the subsequent steps that we would need to take in order to make this sign a reality. So I spoke to my cultural advisory board early in the year to let them know about the project and how we would be funding it. They were supportive. Obviously, they care a lot about the programming that happens at the Art Center and think that it should be advertised. Then we did go to the subcommittee of historic preservation when we were discussing the electricity that would need to be routed from the center to the sign. So that would involve adding a new electrical box on the side of the Art Center. The Art Center is obviously a historic building, but the subcommittee gave us their official approval of adding the electrical box. They suggested that we could paint it the color of the brick to make it more inconspicuous, and we'd be happy to do that. And then most recently, City Council did approve the carry forward of funds that we are hoping to use for this specific project. I'm not sure if I've included this in the slides, but I do want to mention that we also spoke with planning to understand what the next steps would be on that side to install the sign. And we were told that we would need to get a permit for the sign. We would need to follow all the electronic messaging sign code, but we wouldn't need a PUD amendment for this particular project. So that's the rendering that we have at the moment. As you can see, like, you can recognize some of those design elements that are in the other city signs. Even Memory Square Park has a sign that looks basically exactly like that. We just have a 16-inch digital message board at the bottom, which is a little hard to see in this image, but that's at the bottom is where we would have 2 lines of text to put info about programming. We can answer questions later. So the benefits of the sign board, I think, would be that this would allow us to spread information about programming that happens at the center to a wider audience. Like I said, a lot of people just aren't aware of what that building is being used for and how many different art organizations actually host theater and photo galleries and all of that, and obviously city programming, which we've been using it more and more extensively. So I think if we raise awareness through this sign that programming is happening, will attract more people to learn about the organizations that host there, to learn about some of the city's events, and hopefully increase traffic to the Art Center, which is basically the only public space that we have to do indoor art programming. And yeah, obviously we would also be hopefully increasing traffic downtown and all of that through that process. Okay, yeah, so I did have it here. But in terms of the display, I've spoken with Artcraft, and they've explained to me that we would have control over basically every aspect of the display on the board. That includes on and off times, the illumination of the digital aspect of the sign, the speed of the messaging, and the way that we would transition from one message to another. Everything would be controlled through an app that we would program. Like I mentioned, we did talk with planning about compliance with code, and we did figure out the electricity and historical preservation questions. Let me just make sure that I didn't forget anything. I think that's all. In connection to council work plan, I just wanted to mention that I do think that there's an economic vitality aspect to advertising the cultural programming that happens in downtown Louisville. We obviously are thinking about this from an EDI perspective. That's arts and events. That's our primary goal. And there's such a diverse array of programs that happen at the center, so being able to make that information more widely available to our residents would be beneficial. And then I didn't add this to the slide, but I was reading through the standard illumination policies that signs like companies like Artcraft use. And most of these digital message boards do have what they call an automatic brightness sensor. So that means that on an overcast day, the sign would sense that it's darker outside and the brightness of the sign would automatically decrease and thus be, energy saving and decrease the light pollution created by the sign, in addition to the fact that we would just be able to change the brightness when it's day and night and turn it off. So with all of that information, the staff recommendation is to approve the project and move forward with the installation of the sign. But I'm also happy to answer any further questions that there might be.
Thank you. Great presentation. Why don't we take council questions? Would you like to start us off, Councilmember Hamilton?
Sure, thank you. First questions first. Did I hear you right? This was your first time presenting to council?
I did life in Louisville, but that's hardly a presentation.
Okay, well, great work. Your first presentation. My two questions about the content. So you're right, there's an electronic sign at LMS. I think there's some at the other BVSD properties like Fireside as well. This might be more for planning department rather than you, but
Luckily they stayed.
I know. Can we even control what BVSD put on their property as far as signage goes?
No, they're exempt from our sign code, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then for you, Iris, my question is, this facility is embedded within a neighborhood, lots of neighbors surrounding it. So help me to understand in what ways, if any, have those neighbors been engaged at all? And the reason why I ask is because we did have some, I'll categorize as feedback regarding illumination in relation to holiday lighting that goes up at Memory Square Park. So I was wondering if there was any engagement of residents with this proposed change in signage.
So not as of yet. I was basically waiting to see whether we would even have the funding to make the project possible. But now I would be happy to do any kind of outreach that council would suggest that we do. Arts and Events is not a stranger to doing outreach. I mean, we send public notices to neighborhoods about events that are going to take place. We do public comment for public art projects. So there's some different avenues that we could take to get input if we wanted it.
Okay, thank you. That's it for my questions. I'll save my comments for later, Mr. Mayor.
Other questions? Councilmember.
Thanks. And Aldido, good job. And good job speaking up so we can hear you. So I wanted to just kind of get a point of clarification from you. With this sign, the upper portion of the sign that's more in keeping with like the feel and spirit of some of the new signs in Louisville, where it says Louisville Center for the Arts, that's actually a non-digital sign. That's traditional, correct? So the only piece of this that is digital is just that piece below, which if it's not illuminated, just looks like a piece of like black board or something that's underneath of it. Okay. And yeah, that would be the only question. You're right. I'll save my comments. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I just pulled up the rendering again just in case. But when off, yeah, it would just be kind of a black void. Yeah.
Yes, Councilmember Cooperman.
I was curious, the illumination, is it necessarily of a certain color or is that adjustable?
I think that's adjustable as well.
Okay. And then you said you could fit sort of 2 lines of text. I'm just wondering, like, do you think that's sufficient for advertising the types of events that are at the Arts Center?
Yeah, I do. I was discussing it when I was collecting the quotes from the different sign companies, and I think one line for kind of like dates and times, and then the second line for the name of the program or the organization that's putting it on would be sufficient. And also then we're not getting into any sort of like crazy displays of inconsequential info.
Right, okay. And then I was wondering, is the intent to put the sign at basically the same location as the previous sign?
Yeah, and actually, I was going to mention that in terms of lighting in the, like in a residential area. I do think that that location is still like fairly inconspicuous in terms of the location of the housing that's around it. I mean, at most, we would kind of be facing the church that's across the way. Where Memory Square Park is, there's like a Methodist church who have actually also expressed interest in putting a digital sign on their property, but I don't think that the sign would be directly pointing into anybody's window or something.
Right. Okay, so let me just clarify that. So, I assume you would want the sign to basically be perpendicular to the street for best viewing.
So
whereas
you see it's like slightly at an angle.
I don't know. Well, okay, so for a couple things. So would both sides of the sign have the lettering and?
No.
No, okay. And again, so that location, I'm pretty sure is basically like at the west side of the intersection of Grant and Spruce. So the church is down the street a little ways, and that's like basically across the street from a house that's at the corner of Grant and Spruce, at the southwest corner of Grant and Spruce.
Yeah, parallel to the Art Center.
Okay. Anyway, I think I had one other question. Just one other question. In the staff report, I think you mentioned that there isn't any place where we've centralized the information about events that go on at the Art Center. And so this question is not directly about the sign, but I'm just curious, like, why is that? Why don't we have a central place where we have all of that information collected?
I guess technically, if you consider LibCal a location, I mean, all of the reservations are input into LibCal, but that's not really like a public source of information. I think that historically it hasn't been done. We'll put some of the like resident art organizations, we'll put some of their programs in the newsletter, but there just hasn't been a practice of putting everything on the calendar.
Okay. Thank you.
It's on the website, though, isn't it? Huh? Yeah.
So through the mayor, it's my understanding that our policy has been, we do not advertise non-city sponsored functions. That's something for council to consider in the future is, that is one complaint that we receive is that there's not a singular place to go to see community functions. But with that said, there would also be staffing required to maintain that. And so I think that's the main thing is that some of these events are not sponsored by the city.
Okay. Not sure I knew that. Go ahead, Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you. Yeah, I also want to thank you for your presentation. You were very good for your first time.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question on the lighting at night. Is it going to be turned off overnight, or is there some way to put like a piece of wood on the top that would make it downlighting?
I don't think we need a piece of wood. We can just turn it off. And the timing is obviously open to discussion, but my preliminary thought was something like from dawn to dusk. So when it's dark out and it's more likely to be kind of abrasive, we can just turn it off.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. I just realized I think that my comment was more of a question for you. It's kind of an idea. I like the idea that you can rotate on this, that it would come up and say, like an event is happening, but then like a minute later it would pop. You were mentioning the access and people not knowing about this. I think one of the big things that people don't know is when it's open. So, because it's so sporadic, whether it's not like it's every single day from these. So I was actually thinking, is that possible that one of the things that pops up is like come on in or welcome, we're open today, and it has like, just so that people actually know that it is open.
Yeah, I think generally it's the center is really only open when there is a public program going on there, and we do allow private events to happen at the art center. So I think there's different ways that we could kind of program it, either to only have a display when there's something going on that's open to the public, and then people know that they're able to go in because the display is on, or, I mean, we could have like a slide that just says closed to the public, and then we have that on days when there isn't anything, or if there's like a private event happening. But yeah, I mean, there's not really, on days when there's nothing happening in the art center, there's no one there staffing the location. But I agree, some people find that confusing and think that it's kind of like a venue that's always open and always has staff answering questions about it. So we could use the sign to help decrease the confusion.
Thank you.
It's from council. All right, thank you very much. We can talk a little bit about this. Who would like to start us off? Oh, we do have to have public comments. Yes, we do. Do we have anybody in the public who would like to venture forth? Okay. Thanks, Deb. Yeah, Councilmember Cooperman.
I'll start. So let's see. On the one hand, I definitely agree with Councilor Hamilton that it would probably be good to get some information about what the neighbors might think about having the sign there. I also, I don't know, I kind of like the idea, but I'm also wondering whether or not it's worth it. So it's about twice the cost, right, to have the digital sign. But it is, you know, I feel like it's a pretty low traffic area. Like there aren't that many people who walk by. I mean, there are people who walk by certainly, but there are not that many people who drive by. You know, if depending on the orientation of the sign, it might actually be harder for people who drive by to read it. And you know, the people who are at the park and such, you know, again, depending on the orientation, I feel like, you know, you could go to the pool, you could go to the playground without ever seeing the sign, depending on where you put the sign. So I guess I'm, you know, I'm a little bit concerned about whether we want to spend twice as much for a digital sign when, you know, it might not get that much traffic, and it's unclear at the moment how the neighborhood feels about having that there. So those are my thoughts at the moment.
Thank you. Others? Councilmember Hafner.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the great presentation. I come at this from the perspective of our sign code. And if this were anyone else other than the city wanting to do this sign, they would have to get it approved in a PUD in this area. And to get it approved, they would have to demonstrate exceptional and unique circumstances warranting the use of an electronic message center. I, for one, am uncomfortable applying a different standard to the city than we would apply to a private developer. And only for that reason do I have reservations about approving this. I think if our sign code was different, I wouldn't have an issue, but I don't think we would let someone else put an electronic sign there, and I think we should live by our own rules.
Okay, other council members? Yes, Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think that the public interest and the fact that it would create an opportunity for people to understand and have more knowledge of the accessibility to the building and its events, I think is provides like a benefit to the public and to our residents, and hence the reason I can see a value in it. I do agree with Councilmember Cooperman that maybe there should be, we work with Public Works or the planning department to find like the right placement for it. Maybe it doesn't necessarily go back exactly where the old one was, but base it on how it would be most visible. I mean, historically, the sign has been there in the summer when it's shady. It's hard to read it, the old sign anyway, because the sun didn't hit it. So it was a brown sign, you couldn't really tell. I do think that it will be beneficial, and there is, I think, bike and car traffic because of the park, or people who do want to know if there is something, they'll drive by, see the sign, oh, it's open, or oh, there's an event, great, and then they can move forward with it, where the way that the system is set up now, it takes an awful lot of effort to know what's happening at the Art Center, probably more effort than we want it to take for our residents and the conveniences. I do recommend, though, that having some conversation with the community members would be of benefit. I think making sure that they understand that you, council, has the option of saying it won't be illuminated past dusk. I mean, unless there is an event maybe that is going on and you need the sign to say that. But I think during the day with it being illuminated, I can't imagine it being much of an issue or a bother or a nuisance to any of our residents. But it wouldn't hurt to find out from them. Otherwise, I like this idea. I agree with Sharon's proposal originally and the conversation she had with you. Thank you for the work. I would be in favor of saying yes to this.
Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. First of all, to Iris and staff, I appreciate you taking this opportunity by Mother Nature to evaluate, right? Let's just not put back up what was there. Let's think, are there other ways we can serve our community with this opportunity to possibly improve the sign? And the research that you did to help support that potential opportunity. I will say, I think unlike some of my other council members, I do have concerns about putting electronic signage in this particular area. I think just the aesthetics within that neighborhood and also nature and parks is, for many of us, a refuge from electronics, to actually unplug and get away from them. If this art center was located in a different spot, love the idea. It's just the location for me I'm getting hooked up on with all those parks. Personally, I would, if I lived in that beautiful white house, catty corner from it with all those gorgeous flowers out front, if I walked outside my door every day, regardless if it's during the day or not, and I saw an electronic sign there, it would change how I feel about my house and where I live. Even if it's turned on at night, all these great things that you thought of, Iris, of like dusk to dawn. So I have concerns about not the idea, but the idea in this location specifically. But I'm open to other ideas of how we improve the advertising outside of electronic signage in the Memory Square Park area.
I may be an outlier. I think I am. We, relative to other communities, do, in my view, a lot with what we have on arts, but I think everything that we don't do everything we can. I think it's not, for me, a question of either or, it's a question of both and. The sign that you found, which I really appreciate, is controllable in so many different ways that I just don't look at this as being particularly onerous and bothersome to anybody. That road is not seldom used. That road is used, it's used by me a lot, but it's not only used by me. There's plenty of other people who use Spruce as well, if in part to go up Spruce and down to the down to City Hall and up to a variety of different developments and side streets. I think the way people get information is in many different forms, and having electronic signage there, I think, is going to get more information to people, and I really think that's a good thing. Just on general principle, I have no quarrel with finding out what the neighbors think. I think that's not a bad idea. I guess I'd be more inclined to say let's, approve of it unless that there's a outcry from the neighbors. To me, I think that's a better way to go. And I don't think that putting up another kind of sign that might, either not have anything about the events that are going on, or that has kind of a static, a placard or whatever, is really a good option. That's what we've done in the past, and I just like the idea of punching it up a little bit, making it a little bit more modern. The comment that Councilmember Hefner made, I think, is an interesting one about we ought to live by our own code, and I think there's times when that should be the case, but I think I'd sort of echo what Councilmember Kern said. This is a public use. The arts are really important, as anybody who's probably talked to me about this or I've talked to say. It's hugely important to the community, and I think that's a big distinction from the kind of commercial purposes that the sign code often serves. So I think that's one of the reasons why we have an exemption for certain folks, is that it's recognized that the city serves a bunch of people and people pay taxes for it. So I'd prefer to move ahead with it, subject to what any particularly adverse comments from the neighbors. I'm not sure now, putting on my, I'm seeing a comment from Matt Post coming. Yes, go ahead.
I just want to be sure that the council is aware. Councilor Hefner brought up the requirement for a final PUD. She actually mentioned in her presentation, the church across the street does want to do an electronic message sign. They would be required to go through the final PUD process, come before City Council and Planning Commission, engage with an architect, those sorts of things. So we have had ongoing conversations with that property owner. I just want to make sure that the council's aware that that we have talked to that property owner about the process for establishing an electronic message sign.
Are you suggesting there may be a RFRA issue?
I'm sorry, what was that, Mayor?
Well, okay. Yeah, okay. Well, maybe I should just ask it. That's not, the fact that we do it is.
I don't know enough
Okay.
to make an off-the-cuff
That's fine.
assessment.
Yeah, I guess I would distinguish, but I think at some level I may be on the short end of this. So perhaps we ought to, because what I'm hearing is some reservations about having an electronic sign, and maybe
No.
No, not from everybody. Looks like, all right. Well, Councilmember Hefner, maybe what we can start with is, yes or no on the, are you?
I'm a no, only for the reason I said. I think if our sign code was different, I would be all in favor of this. I am uncomfortable, as you point out, Mayor, asking a church to go through a burdensome and difficult process and show extraordinary circumstances for a sign in essentially the same place that we're willing to just grant ourselves permission for. It's a one rule for thee, another rule for me kind of situation, and that's really my only objection. I share your strong appreciation for the arts. I share your strong interest in seeing our art center be successful and seeing it be a successful public venue. I just think we, to me, there's a fairness component of trying to follow our own rules to the letter.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. To that, what are, and maybe this is for Director Zaccaro, what are the current policies? I mean, for, like, if the city were to build, I mean, does the city have to bring a PUD? Does it have to get the permission of the council to make things, or how does that?
So there's an exemption for city informational signs and other city signs in the sign code. So the city could choose to go through the PUD process for all the reasons discussed, but the sign code does provide a waiver for city signs.
Okay, so it's not like it's not like we are like making a special carve out within the sign code. The sign code already has that, and it specifies that the city can do informational signage of this nature. It's already there. It's not like we're trying to do something that's not already in the code.
Generally, city signs are exempt broadly, I would say, by the sign code. It doesn't specifically call out electronic message signs. It's just any city public purpose sign, I think, is the intent of that exemption.
Okay. And then Boulder Valley Schools, it's just like it normally is, like they're exempt from any of our sign code because they're exempt from all of our codes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Cooperman.
I guess I'm just wondering what makes sense. So like, if we said, yes, we'd like to go ahead with the sign, but we do want you to do some outreach, and the outreach comes back and says, oh no, we absolutely don't want that here. You know, where does that put us? You know, does it, I'm just wondering what order of operations sort of makes the most sense for.
Well, I think we could do it the way I had suggested, but I think probably a better way, if people want public input as a factor of, to me, that's not dispositive from my standpoint. It's a public building. We have an exemption. Serves an important function. So I think it might make a big difference to any of the council members about how they voted. I mean, Councilmember Hamilton made some good points about that. I think the White House on the corner might have very strong views, and those might resonate with council. I'm not prejudging it, but maybe the one suggestion I might make is to get some of the information from the neighbors and bring it back and decide, we could decide whether to go forward or not. But I guess what I'm also hearing is we got 6 people here, and I hear, I'm not clear that without that information, we would support it and we could vote on it. I would put out that suggestion so that we have that information and we could decide on it then. We can decide up or down now, but it'd be better to get a consensus somehow if we could. But I mean, it may be that we're not going to support it in any event. 3-3 tie means it fails. And I think I'm hopeful that the neighbors would be pleased with it. But I don't want to draw it out. I hear.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to recommend the same thing. So for us, before we engaged in any public engagement efforts, sorry to use that word too many times in that sentence, it'd be good to know if council was supportive.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fool's errand if we get all the input and then no matter what, council is not interested. I guess maybe one way of doing this is if the public were supportive, the people in the neighborhood were supportive, would council members be supportive of the sign as proposed? And then we can ask the question, I mean, if not, then I can ask the question of whether you're supportive regardless. I mean, if somebody right now does not want that sign at all, that's good to know. I think Councilmember Hefner, that was the gist, is what I heard from you. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right, for the reasons I said. It's not about the sign.
Yeah. So, pardon me?
So I'm understanding Councilmember Hefner is in disagreement with the code as it's written, our sign code as it's written, because we have an exemption for the city signs.
I think the code as written allows us to do it. I don't think it's fair for us to say somebody else has to demonstrate exceptional circumstances, exceptional and unique circumstances. And to me, I mean, we have an interest in doing this. I don't know if it's an exceptional and unique interest.
Okay. Let me put it this way. Regardless of what the public says, are you in favor or not in favor of this sign? If we take right now, if you...
Not, I mean, if we had the public input, it wouldn't make a difference to what I'm saying right now.
Yeah, and that's what I hear. Others? Do you have?
I mean,
I'm just taking a straw vote before we actually make the...
So what exactly are you asking us?
If you do not want the sign, regardless of what the public's input is, you can say so. If it would matter to you.
If staff had come to us today and said they did a survey, and I originally said the residents in the area, but I'm going to expand it because I mentioned earlier there are a lot of us that go to parks and open space as a refuge from electronics. So if they were to say the users of the park want this, then I would say that's what the people want and that's what we should do.
Okay. Anything further to add? Councilmember Cooper? Because I'm going to make a motion after you're done.
Yeah. Not really. Kind of wavering between what Councilor Hamilton just said and being in support of the sign.
Okay. I'm going to move that we support the sign as it's been presented to us by staff.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion?
May I just make a recommendation with this conversation? This sign, the way that it is displayed, I've seen things like this. I mean, I was asking you a question because I was hoping just for the public to understand for record reasons. When this is off, there is no way you can tell that this is a digital sign. It'll look like just all the wood signs. And I think also to kind of the comments that Councilmember Cooper and I were making about the placement of it, Councilmember Hamilton too, that it doesn't actually have to be turned to face into the park space. It can be more that it is like the entrance into the facility and to the road versus being like a sign to the park. It's also not going to be a colorful moving sign that's, invasive. If you put, you're thinking like one goes to the next, it doesn't have to like be rotating. I mean, we can limit that so that it doesn't have that moving text. It's just on, which would have a similar appearance to a black background where staff went ahead and put in white like verbiage and had a light that shone on it day and night so that you could see that language. So, it says open today, or they take it off and it doesn't say open, or it has the name of entertainers. So this will actually allow them to do that without having to be physically out there. It'll basically be black. It could be white. It could be baby blue, or as you mentioned, it can be different colors. But I think that it is a very mild, it's not what I think a lot of people think of as digital. It's not backlit. So it's just a black background. Usually those white or lighter color backlit signs, like the ones that we just approved for a Vista to use, those are the ones that project and are like, oh, that's a sign. Instead, this is going to, during the day, allow you to be able to read what is happening, and at night, it won't be on. So That's I just think also like making sure that maybe there's even a picture instead of a drawing of what those signs look like actually would be helpful for people to understand that this type of digital sign is more of a facilitator than a giant advertisement. Thank you.
To clarify, I'm not including a survey of the neighborhood or beyond in my motion. Are we ready to vote? Nope. Councilman Cooperman.
So your motion was seconded.
Right.
So does that mean I cannot make a friendly amendment?
No, you could make a friendly amendment.
Then I'll make a friendly amendment that we instruct staff to perform some form of survey of residents as well as park goers.
I won't accept that. So I think it dies on this vote. And all in favor? Aye. And all opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Right, it fails. Do you want to offer a different motion?
Sure. Mayor, I move that we table this item indefinitely.
So
is there a second? Okay. No second. Go ahead, Councilmember Cooperman.
I move that we support staff's recommendation around the digital sign, but that we ask staff to perform some form of survey of neighborhood residents as well as park goers.
I will second with an amendment. That survey not just be for the park goers and just those neighboring residents, because there are a lot of other people that utilize. I think if we're going to survey our residents, survey the residents. Put it on the website. It can be the Engage Louisville or something like that. Let it be open to people, because we also had comments from people who don't live in that neighborhood who have an opinion on this. And I think it would be fair for all of these people to be able to take that survey. And I think then and again, putting something in the survey that really explains what this sign is so that people know what it would look like or not look like and the parameters, I think that would be beneficial. But I would second that with that amendment if you'll take that.
That's
I'm curious. So I just have to accept or not accept. Is that
right? And then you can.
I'll accept your amendment.
The seconder, who seconded it?
That was me.
Okay. You can accept your own.
I can accept my own amendment. Thank you.
All right. So, any discussion? Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
I just want to clarify. So the motion is to approve the staff recommendation pending approval from the residents via the survey to the city, all the residents.
I think it's actually not just the neighborhood, but the
Right, the residents of Louisville.
yeah.
Yeah, it's pending their approval.
I think that's the motion. I'm going to say that I can't imagine doing a survey of the entire city of Louisville for the purpose of approving or disapproving one sign. I think maybe staff can help as to what that might involve. I mean, maybe we could do it with Engage Louisville. I just don't know how. It strikes me as, wow, that's pretty significant. And if we ever do another sign for the city, are we going to be willing? I mean, I'm thinking not just in this situation, but other situations. I mean, I don't know as much as I'd love to have a sign, I'm not sure I could support that. But I'd be interested. Do you have a sense of how we could accomplish that if we chose to?
I think that my initial thought on this was that we treat it similarly to public art, where we basically put information on the website, we put an A-frame in the exact location where the sign would be, which should be fairly noticeable to people that are going to be interacting with it on a daily basis. And we provide, for public art, we provide my email and contact information and a period for public comment when anybody can call me or talk to me about what they think about it. We also usually set up a special board meeting where people can call in and express their opinions. So that was my original thought as how we would get resident input on this. I mean, I am also doing a poll for the movie on Main Street on Engage Louisville, so I've done that before. I'm just not sure. I'm also not sure whether every single Louisville resident is going to have like a meaningful opinion on the question, but I'm open to that suggestion as well. I mean, Engage Louisville is really easy to set up, so we could do it.
I mean, that's a good piece of information because maybe, and what you raise is interesting because it's actually moving it more toward a sort of sign as like public art, that process, which is a novel way to do it, but maybe that isn't that onerous, doing that. I think the question is maybe for those on council who are moving and friendly, offering friendly amendments, whether that's kind of an acceptable sort of way of doing it. Yeah, Councilmember Hamilton.
I mean, thank you, Councilmember Kern, for that suggestion of expanding it. I actually think that is a very good idea in this circumstance. I don't think it's something that has to be done over and over again when we put up every sign for the city, but I think this would be the first electronic sign in a park or open space area in the city of Louisville. And to me, that deserves special treatment and assessment for the whole community, and it could help inform future sign planning as well. So I think if we were to do that and the community said we love this idea, then go for it.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing from you, I guess the question to clarify is, you said that you're likely to get a limited group. I mean, I wonder, my only question is whether this is going to serve the purpose that you're describing.
I mean, I think it would, and especially this time of year with Memory Square Park open and people renting the shelters, I think this is actually a great time to do the survey and put up the notice where the other sign, was destroyed. So I think, if nothing, this is our opportunity to get as broad engagement as possible.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Yeah, just two follow-up questions for staff. One would be, if you put something on Engage Louisville, how easy would it be to sort of sift through or arrange for the feedback to be sifted through, to get a good sense for what people think?
I do think I would work with our comms manager to make a final decision on how that would look. And I'm not, so I don't know if I want to go into like potentials of what it could be. I mean, there could be like a scale and then that's accompanied with a text box. So there is some sort of quantitative piece that allows you to get like just an overview. But I think depending on whether we're doing the public notice or the Engage Louisville or both, we could develop like a precise plan for feedback. The public comment has generally been a collection of oral and written comments with no quantitative piece.
Okay. And I'm also just curious, so if this were going through a PUD process, would we notify residents in the area? Is that a requirement of the?
Yeah, so I mean, I have people who can supplement that information, but just because I went through the process of learning about it, I want to show that I'm an A+ student. But it sounds like if we did go through the PUD amendment process, we would do a very similar thing that I'm suggesting that I know from the public art process, but there would be 2 rounds of public comment, one for the Planning Commission, and then a second one before this idea comes back to council. So those would be 2 2-week-long public comment periods, then go to Planning Commission, then the second comment period, and then go to City Council. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. 750-foot buffer for all those properties would get noticed. We would do that for Planning Commission. The comment period technically would remain open, but yeah.
Go ahead.
And I'm curious, particularly for Councilor Hamilton, like, do you think some kind of notice of residents in the area would be a good idea? Like, so people, if this were a PUD, the people within that range of the location would get something in the mail that said, we're thinking about this, so that those people in particular are informed.
Are you asking me if would be sufficient in my mind in replacement of the survey?
No. Like, if you think that should be in some way part of the informing people about the survey, I don't know.
Oh, I mean, I'm not certain if that would add additional value. Yeah, my main concern is that as a community as a whole, this is a shift, and people should be able to have an input on it, even outside of that immediate area. Yeah.
Thanks.
Let me raise one. I know that Councilmember Hefner is waiting here for a second, but I wanted to raise something of an incongruity. It seems to me that if we're talking about getting a survey, we really need to get that before we approve the sign. It sounds like that's where at least some of the discussion is going. Because otherwise you approve the sign and I mean, it was what I initially suggested, is approving the sign subject to, some adverse opinion of people. But it seems like if you've approved the sign, you're kind of tipping your hand. It seemed like it would be better to have the input of the public before we approve a sign or not.
I think it's just to save a spot, like to save another, from having to have Iris come back and talk. It's more like we're saying, yes, she'll do the survey, get the responses. If the public's not interested, then you have to come up with a new plan.
Yeah.
And if the public is like, yeah, that works, then she moves forward because we already told her she can.
Well, let's try to restate the motion so I understand, because I don't quite understand how we're approving a sign if we're seeking public input. And I don't know whether, what if we have, 30%, only 30% who have problem with it. I don't quite understand without that information how we can approve the sign tonight.
Can we get Councilmember Hefner's comments, and then I'd love
please.
to hear what the city
Councilmember
manager
Hefner.
has to say on that.
Yeah.
I just want to, speaking of the public, I just want to confirm that we've taken public comment. We've had a member of the public with a hand up for quite some time.
Oh my gosh. Pardon me? We did public comment. I did not see that. Did we?
It came
When I
up
asked.
well after public comment.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think. Well, no, but we've finished the public comment for tonight. So, do you understand what the point is that I'm making? Yeah.
I do, but I think we originally were asked to vote so that staff doesn't spend time on a survey that they shouldn't be. Like, I thought that was the original. So I'll pass, it looks like
Yeah,
the city manager has.
go ahead.
Yes, staff's recommendation is that council approves the concept of a digital art sign so that arts and events can continue to pursue the project of installing a new sign. So what we're asking you to do is to approve the concept tonight of a digital sign. If council wants us to do a survey, as Iris suggested, in terms of the process that she would normally do for, through the Cultural Arts Board, to get that input, or whether it's through Engage Louisville. I would just say with Engage Louisville, it's not necessarily just going to be Louisville residents. It could be anybody that goes to the website. And so I think Iris's proposal in terms of how she would normally handle it with the A-frame sign and putting contact information with the activity at the park, I think we could also notice that there is an opportunity to provide public comment and provide the rendering of the sign, put that on the website to garner as much public comment that we can. I also want to say that as much discussion that we're having, we can manipulate the operation of the sign to comply with what the public's requesting, so that at the end of the day, with feedback that we receive, let's say the feedbacks don't operate it at night. Okay, we can do that. Or, oh, we only want this color. We can do that. Or we don't want streaming messages that scroll across. We just want the static messages that change. We can do that as well. So the survey could also be structured such to provide that type of feedback, with the understanding that, we can move forward with the digital sign. And if the sign were to become a problem, as noted, you can just turn it off and then have static messages there that, where we're going back to the old school ways of you're just putting a message up there of what's happening at that point in time. So I appreciate the conversation. My summary of this is we can accommodate basically, I think, most complaints that come across related to this. And so it really comes down to a policy decision for council of, do you want to support the installation of a digital sign in which we are doing an exemption from the sign code?
That's a little bit different than the motion that we've got on the table, but I could offer a substitute motion that we approve the concept of a digital arts center sign, and that the staff conduct a survey of the sort that I think has been described by Iris tonight. And do I have a second? Okay. Discussion? Any further discussion? Shall we vote? Voice vote. All in favor? Aye. So and all opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. So that's a 4-2 in favor. All right. I think we can move on to the city attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report.
Okay, we're identification of future agenda items. Councilmember Hamilton.
There's actually, it's not a future agenda item, but there's no other time for me to mention this because it happened during the meeting. Kathleen, I wanted to thank you for always making sure that we stay, on task and procedurally, or because it can be hard to navigate what's going on up here. So I wanted to thank you for doing that, and it's much appreciated during the meetings that we can quick phone a friend and call on you to help with that. So thank you.
Second.
Well, you're welcome, because we almost did actually phone a friend during the break.
Well, all we had to do is get you two together and look at that. But I thank you. I agree with that. Others? Any other future agenda items? Councilmember Hefner? All right.
Nothing further from me. Thank you.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Yes.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, folks.